Let us pray. As we meet at a time when signs of springs are followed by days of winter, we pray for the meeting tonight, for the ability to see the overview and the fine detail, for the wisdom to discern what's right for this town and its people in all their rich diversity, for the humility to acknowledge when we're wrong and when our natural opponents might actually have a point. We pray for the town of Basingstoke and its surrounding villages, for those who work here, live here, come to play here, are ill and are cared for here. We pray tonight for those with no roof over their head, for those with complex needs that make them hard to help. And for this meeting tonight, we pray for patience when process takes time, for good timekeeping and good humour. Amen.
When you're quite ready. There are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exit is located at the rear of the room. Go down the back stairs and meet in War Memorial Park. Apologies for absence. I have apologies from Councillor West, who wishes us all well. Councillor, I have heard nothing from Councillor Ellery. Are there any other apologies? I've often wondered that. Declarations of interest? If anything comes up during the meeting, please indicate. Minutes of the Council meeting held on the 11th of December, paper A. Councillor Watts?
Mr. Mayor, I want to challenge the accuracy of the minutes in one small respect. At the bottom of page 17, the words "resolved, the motion is lost." Now, I've spent most of the time since that meeting trying to get advice on the statutory or constitutional basis for the advice you were given then. Eventually I got it, not from a lawyer, and it says that this was custom and practice. It goes on to say that the locally accepted interpretation of 14.4 paragraph B on page 98 of the Constitution. Now that paragraph deals with exactly the opposite situation. If there are no votes against, then the motion is implemented immediately. The Constitution is silent of what happens when there are votes against. I find it difficult to see how there could be a locally accepted interpretation of something that isn't there. But my request is, can we have a schedule of locally accepted interpretations attached to the Constitution, please? Instead of the resolution and motion was lost, can I ask that this resolution be referred to the Constitution Working Party?
Based on the advice that I had from officers, the correct decision was made on the night and the motion was lost, but I would agree with you that the situation should be referred to the Constitutional Working Party to come back with a better wording of that part of the Constitution to avoid any ambiguity. Councillor Bierman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wish to refer to item 7 on page 8, where in fact you are referred to, and it says the Mayor agreed to ensure that Councillor Bierman would receive an answer to his questions, particularly regarding the process that was followed to constitute the working party. I have had an answer of sorts, but not a resolution of the basic problem, and I wonder whether I could have your reassurance. I think you've got a rough idea where I'm going on this, that the matter will be resolved. That the matter will be resolved in a proper fashion.
Could you speak to me after the meeting? Are the minutes agreed? Thank you. Right, announcements. I have a couple. A certificate of appreciation was presented to me by the Hampshire Music Education Hub for the support given by Basingstoke and Dean over its first 2 years. I have the plaque that they gave me, which I shall hand to our acting chief executives to find somewhere suitable to display. I've also got my black tie dinner, which is coming up on the 17th of April, Audley's Wood. It'll be at 7:30, dinner at 8. Tickets are £50 each, but it's going to be excellent value. That will include drink drink on reception, 3-course dinner, tea, coffee and mince. We're having an auction and raffle, and you should all have details, so please, as many of you as possible, come along. Acting Chief Executive, any announcements? None. Right, at this point I have the pleasure of making a presentation to our previous Chief Executive, Tony Curtis. It's always a pleasure to see Tony, however fleetingly. He has given excellent service to this council over many years. And Tony, would you like to come forward?
Mr Mayor, thank you, and councillors, thank you very much. Mr Mayor, leader councillors, former and very much valued colleagues, before I start, could I just say that as your former Chief Executive, I'm very conscious of the importance of balance and proportionality. You are going to hear, oh, by the way, the Mayor has said that the 5-minute rule doesn't apply to me. So I'm going to get my own. I've got something to say about you, Councillor Keating, and others. Mr. Mayor, I'm very conscious about balance and proportionality, and you will find there are 26 references to individual councillors in what I'm going to say. 11 of those will be Conservative, 7 Labour, 4 Liberal Democrat, 3 Independent and 1 UKIP. I'm pleased to be here, Mr Mayor, for lots of reasons. Firstly, to say thank you for the present. I know what's in here. It's binoculars and pedometer. And the reason for that is that now that I have some more time on my hand, my wife and I are enjoying some travelling and lots of walking. And it's nice to know just how many miles you've walked. Many thanks to all of you for the gifts, which are much appreciated. Knowing that I don't, why I'm really pleased to be here, however, is knowing that I don't have to stay. I don't I don't have to advise on those obscure interpretations of the Constitution offered so frequently by Councillor Raffel and Councillor Harvey, or avoid the excessive frowning which I'm prone to when Councillors Keating, Councillor Cubitt and others reinvent the Constitution. I also am pleased to say I can leave before the budget debate, and I won't suffer the way in which Kevin suffers whilst you maul and attempt to demolish his much treasured budget. I know it's your budget, really. Mr. Mayor, with your indulgence, I'm going to repeat just a few words that I said when I actually left at the end of November. Most of, however, of what I'm going to say is going to be new and about the councillors and very much about my time at Basingstoke-and-Deane. But I will just mention, because I think this should be on public record, that when I started in local government 40 years ago, things were very much different. We had no computers, no copiers, no electronic communication, no word processing, no social networking, no freedom of information request, no taxpayers alliance, no data protection and no scrutiny. And wasn't it good? And what was even better, and there won't be too much political incorrectness in here, but I can't resist this, there was no Eric Pickles. And do you know we didn't see elected members very much either. I'll move on. I started in 1974, and I'm thinking really of Councillors Harvey and Councillor J. Warden are here in what I'm going to say in terms of their potential roles in the future. There was major local government reorganisation in 1974, and I have a suspicion it won't be long before we see that again, and I wish Basingstoke-and-Deane well in terms of having a senior role in whatever new structures follow. But for those two particular councillors, or in their new PCC roles, that year was marked by 2 general elections and 1 failed attempt to form a coalition and 1 change of national government. I just wonder if we might see that in 2015. During my 40 years, I mentioned this before, I spent a lot of time in town planning. I've probably been involved in the grant of planning permission for about 30,000 houses. I've been in private eye twice, have worked for various administrations, including Conservative, Labour, Liberal Democrat and a Liberal Democrat-Labour coalition. Have only had 1 failed planning appeal, and I promise you this, only 1 failed JR, had a few planning successes and numerous planning disasters. 40 years after I started my career in town planning, many of the buildings that I was responsible for are being demolished. Mr. Mayor, I would like to focus briefly on my 16 years here, and I want to spend most of the time talking about people who have influenced me so positively and supported me so well, and many of those are here this evening. I've worked with some fantastic committed people, both within the council, members and officers, and within the community, our partners and our stakeholders. At the top of the tree are the staff here. They are fantastic, they are your greatest asset, and they deserve your support and respect at all times, Mr. Mayor. At Basingstoke-and-Deane we achieved a lot and we made a positive difference. The customer satisfaction figures are really remarkable. They reflect the work of the council and all those partners. Before I became Chief Executive, I worked for 2 Chief Executives who I'll mention briefly. Katrine Small, known to some of the stalwarts here, who was the person who gave me the opportunity to be a director. She was the main reason I came to Basingstoke-and-Deane, because she had vision and determination. Gordon Holcroft followed her as Chief Executive. Gordon was firmly focused on improvement and performance. Gordon was probably, I'm sure Karen will agree, the most competitive person that we've ever worked with. But he was also great fun, and like Katrine, very supportive to me. He also brought Karen to Basingstoke, for which we all must be very, very grateful. And I'm pleased to have a part in bringing Laura to Basingstoke-and-Deane as well. This leads me briefly to the only 2 management teams that existed in my time here, 2 beautifully formed teams of 3, Karen Dorcas Bunton, who many of you know, and me, and more recently Karen Lauren and me. Those teams had common traits: extremely committed, hard-working, relentlessly focused on improvement, but most of all for me, really loyal. and very much a team. And what I got from Karen and Laura, in addition to loyalty, was great support at some difficult times when ill health affected my family, and in the last year me, and I will always be grateful to my colleagues. I've worked with some fantastic heads of service and senior managers. There isn't time to mention them all. I do want to mention the leaders I've worked with as Chief Executive. Before I do so, I'd just like to pay tribute to the rotating leaders and deputy leaders who were here when I first joined the Council, particularly Rob Donnelly, Brian Gurdon and Paul Harvey, totally different people, but all focused on making Basingstoke-on-Deane a better place. Since 2007, I've had the pleasure of working with three leaders, John Leake, Andrew Finney and Clive Sanders. What stood out for me was the preparedness of all of them to propose bold decisions which they felt would be in the best interests of Basingstoke-on-Deane, and in doing so, gaining cross-party support. And I think that's when the Council really works, when everyone comes together to make a big difference, positive difference. I will never forget John Leake agreeing, and I've got this bit in bold type, so I'll try and emphasise it, to a Labour government proposal, John, to grant new growth point status to Basingstoke-on-Deane, which actually secured £6 million of inward investment to the borough, without which Basingview wouldn't now be happening. Andrew Finney in supporting the vision to develop the local enterprise partnership, and look at the many millions of pounds that are coming to Basingstoke-on-Deane because of that initiative, and in leading our role in the South East Diamonds for growth. And then Clive in continuing Andrew's emphasis on economic development, on the local enterprise partnerships, in developing the master plan initiative, and also his continual impatience, which can be a pain at times, but to ensure that vision becomes reality. And I think those three leaders, in their different ways, were just great to work with. All three of them also gave me the same personal support at times of personal difficulty, and so did the group leaders, Terry, Laura, Gavin, Martin and Stephen. I've had the honour of supporting mayors literally of all shapes and sizes, and I've been stunned by their commitment and indeed their stamina during their mayoral years. Group leaders and members from the political groups and the Independent Forum have also always been there to help and support and advise. I can't name every member of the Council, but there's some I'd like to name from a long way in the past. Councillors Paula Baker, George Hood and Ron Hussey and Gary Watts, who were actually committee chairs when I first came to Basingstoke-on-Deane, and they looked after me in the early years, except when Paula and I got lost on a train to London, which was rather embarrassing on the day of a council meeting. Also, I think, just to make sure I get that political balance, but I mean this genuinely, there are some planning stalwarts who deserve a mention. Martin, Marilyn and Anne are people that gave great service, I think, to the Development Control Committee, and because my background was planning and development control. Finally, Mr Mayor, just a couple of things. When I announced I was leaving, a few people asked if I would return to local government, even possibly as an elected member. My answer remains not a chance. You members all work far too hard, and I admire you for it. I could not have been your CX without a supportive and tolerant wife and family. The council and local government isn't Julie's scene, and frankly, who can blame her? Our family has done brilliantly in Basingstoke-on-Deane. It really is a place to be proud of. Mr Mayor and Council, thank you for the gifts, and to everyone for your guidance and support and friendship over the years. My local government career of 40 years was good. The last 16 years were the best part of those 40 years. I wish you every success in the future. I hope you'll look after Kevin this evening. And finally, Mr Mayor, I hope you excuse me if I don't say Councillor Watts reminded me right at the beginning of this meeting why I don't want to go anywhere near the Constitution ever again. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Goodbye, Tony. Thank you very much. There are no questions from members of the public tonight. Item 7, petitions. We have one. Councillor Pearce is presenting regarding a tree at 20 Cambrian Way.
Somebody still on? Am I on? Good. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You may find this odd that I'm standing here offering a petition to this council about one single tree, but this tree has caused me sleepless nights, quite frankly, and I think if I am having a sleepless night, then you can jolly well have one too. I was in the garden of 20 Cambrian Way some months ago, a lovely resident with a beautiful little garden, and I lost myself in the garden really. It's a tiny little garden, but I actually got quite tired because it was quite dark. I said I ought to be going home for my tea, and he said, well, it's actually only 10 to 11. And that was because this tree shows massive shadow all over his garden. So we've asked people to go and look at it. We've asked people to think if they'll cut it back, because it's been cut back in the past. And all of those avenues, and in fact it's even been to the tree panel. So those residents that are affected by this tree, oh, by the way, it's a Norwegian maple, which is a sycamore, which is what Buckskin and many other estates are planted with, which are completely awful trees. There are too many of them. Their helicopter seeds get into gutters, and saplings grow up from gutters, up from drains. They're an abomination, and all we're looking for is one to be cut right back. Nobody wants to cut it back because there's nothing wrong with the tree. The simple fact is there are too many trees in Buckskin anyway, and they're all of the wrong type. That's a long-term issue. But I feel desperately sorry for these people around 20 Cambrian Way who have got lovely gardens adjacent to their homes, and they're plagued by this blinking tree. Now, no disrespect to our tree department or to the tree panel, but they're wrong. I don't know how they do their measurements. I wasn't there. But I know at midday I stood in that garden and I couldn't see the sun through the tree. I stood by the window and I couldn't see the sun through the tree. And since I've exhausted all other avenues within the council, the only avenue was for me to, or for them to raise a petition, which they have, and they are joined in that petition by my friends here in the Labour group, to say to this council, I presume it'll have to go to a committee, I don't mind where it goes as long as it's dealt with, but to say to the council, please, can this tree at least be cut back, and if it can't be cut back, or if we would prefer it taken out all entirely. Mr. Mayor, who's going to receive this?
Well, I will put the petition to Julia, who will send it on to the appropriate committee.
What committee will that be, Mr. Mayor? The tree panel? No, I can't go back to the tree panel, Mr. Mayor.
I'm sure there is a committee which is responsible for the tree panel. They can have a look at it.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Mayor, the leader has offered to chop it down. It doesn't have to go to any committee now. The cabinet member. I said I'd chop it down.
Councillor Regis.
Trees are in my portfolio, so I'm happy to accept the petition and work with officers as to what we do with that. So I think if it comes to me.
Thank you very much for that. Moving on, item 8, resignations and appointments. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. With your indulgence, I have quite a long list, I'm afraid, so I will just read it out if that's okay. So starting off with EPH, Councillor Peach to come off to be replaced by Councillor Faulkner. CEP, Councillor Marks to come off to be replaced by Councillor Putty. Manydown, Councillor Peach to come off to be replaced by Councillor Tucker. Development Control, Councillor Frost to come off to be replaced by Councillor Ostleton. HR, Councillor Marks to come off to be replaced by Councillor Bean. Scrutiny, Councillor Still to come off to be replaced by Councillor Tate. And then for audit, we have 2 reserve replacements. So Councillor Cherish offers a reserve to be replaced by Councillor Miller, and Councillor Bean to come off as a reserve to be replaced by Councillor Putty. And that's it now. Thank you.
Thank you. Nothing from the Labour Group or the Liberals, nothing from the Independents. I have had an email from Councillor West, leader of the UKIP group. I wish to make changes to committee allocations tonight. Councillor Ellery to come off licensing and off reserve for all other committees. I think we can note that. Thank you. There are no replacements. Councillor Keating.
As you now know, I do reinvent the Constitution every time I speak. But the reality is, we cannot have and should not have council appointments by email. Right? That should not happen, and it should not be endorsed tonight. Thank you.
I received the email and I am making that announcement on behalf of Councillor West. So I am quite happy with that procedure. We can now move on to the meat of tonight's business. My apologies. Outside Bodies, Appendix A. I will run through them in order. There are very few, so please indicate if there is anything there that you are interested in. Barlows Park Management Association, Tadley. Nope. Basingstoke Music Festival Committee. Nope. Basingstoke Youth Action Trust. Enterprise First. Northern Road Safety Council. Relate North and East Hampshire and Borders. They will be carried forward to the next meeting. Thanks. Right, we can now move on to the meat of the business. Reports for decision. Reports and recommendations made by Cabinet and committees. Cabinet held on the 27th of January 2015. Proposals for the Policy and Budget Framework 2015-16. The Budget Report, see Paper B, pages 5304, 5305 of the Minute Book. And the leader will present.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Basingstoke-on-Deane is in good shape. Not my words, but those of a seasoned and impartial observer of the borough, none other than the retiring editor of the Gazette, in his last article for the newspaper. And it is worth reminding ourselves what a good place the borough has become over the last few years. It's now rated as one of the top places in the country to live. It's one of the best places to start a new business. And it's #1 in the country as a home to new digital businesses. Unemployment in Basingstoke is below both the national and regional averages. The number of people claiming job seekers allowance in Basingstoke fell last year by 41%. But on contrast, the number of apprenticeships has doubled by 2014 compared with 2010. So as a council, we deliver the 9th highest spend per head of any district in the country. But we still have the 6th lowest council tax. It is no wonder that 96% of our residents think that this is a great place to live, and that more than 3/4 are happy with the way that the council is performing. The number of people who think we are delivering value for money has gone up by more than 50% from when we first took over the administration. And why? Because we have cut out nearly 8 million of waste accumulated through inactivity and incompetence of our predecessors, but without making any cuts to essential services. That's 8 million saved despite a period of the most difficult economic environment seen in decades. 8 million saved, whilst council taxpayers have been protected year after year with no increase in council tax. 5 years with no increase, and under this budget there will be no increase again next year. So yes, our borough is in good shape. But the editor goes on to say, exciting times are on the horizon. And there is no doubt that our place to be proud of is really going places. And again, he's right. Under this administration, we have a long-term economic plan to make Basingstoke-on-Deane an even better place to be, to become one of the powerhouses of economic growth in the south, creating high-value jobs, harnessing the latest technologies, bringing in new and exciting facilities for residents, and creating a prosperity in which all can share. The signs are already there. The tower cranes are back, always an indication of an area on the move. In a few months' time, we will see the opening of a groundbreaking new John Lewis and Waitrose combined store. Network Rail's new HQ is about to open, and Basingview is gradually being transformed. The top of the town is already taking on a new vitality, with exciting plans for a complete reshaping of the area unveiled last year. We've now agreed an exclusivity arrangement to develop detailed proposals for the redevelopment of the leisure park to consolidate its position as a regional destination of choice with the latest attractions for us all to enjoy. These are all very tangible signs that our vision to secure a better future for Basingstoke is not just talk, we are delivering. And the key planks of achieving that vision are economic growth and housing. Our borough has a tremendous potential, a potential that is now being recognised at all levels and particularly in government. We have an unrivalled location in the centre of the south, surrounded by beautiful countryside, yet within easy access to London, the ports, the Midlands and the South West. We have the connectivity by road, by rail and by air, and compared to rival towns, we have relatively easy accessibility. And when you get here, we have low-cost parking. We are car-friendly. I don't know if any of you have tried going to Guildford recently, but the contrast is remarkable. What makes our borough unique in this area is that we combine those benefits with business land availability and with a workforce with the knowledge and skills that makes businesses growth and business creation possible. Only this week, the first group of small businesses are taking part in the initiative we are funding with Set Squared to develop the employers of the future. We have to make sure that we maintain and develop the competitive benefits that we offer by investing in business resources and working closely with schools and colleges, the business community, to ensure we meet the challenges that economic growth will bring, as well as reaping the rewards. This budget provides the resources to enable businesses to continue to flourish. But talk to any business and they will tell you that one of the first things that they need is homes for their employees. And that means a range of housing, not fields concreted over with mile after mile of council houses, but a good mix of all types of sustainable and desirable housing constructed to a high standard, creating open, friendly places where people really want to live and bring up their children, and communities that will thrive in the long term. That is why we have to get in place the local plan, so that those who will rely on for future investment in the borough, whether in Whitehall or in the private sector, can have the confidence of knowing that we can ensure there is properly planned and coherent housing development to support our economic growth. I don't think the residents of our borough will tolerate any more political bickering, obstruction or NIMBYism. We owe it to them to get the job done and the plan agreed. A key element in delivering housing and economic vitality must be the provision of adequate infrastructure. No one wants the quality of life here in the borough to be sacrificed on the altar of growth. That is why, with the New Homes bonus, rather than using most of it to bolster revenue funding, as so many councils are doing, and some here would support, we are allocating 80% towards infrastructure locally or for the benefit of the borough as a whole. We need that money to secure our future. It is why Also, we have worked so hard to attract additional funding from government, from the local enterprise partnership and other sources. Over 35 million of investment has been allocated to the borough for major infrastructure projects in the last year alone, making possible improvements to the Blackdown roundabout, the A33, the A340, and just this month, new funding for the Brighton Hill roundabout. Initiatives that we have waited decades to see. In total, during the last 9 years of this administration, we have attracted nearly 50 million of additional government investment into the borough. Proof, if it were needed, that this administration is ensuring central government buys into our vision for Basingstoke and Deane for the future, because we are now seen as a well-run council that delivers. Now, of course, there are still problem issues to tackle. It will be criminal if we allow the pursuit of prosperity to be at the expense of the most disadvantaged and vulnerable in our community. Changes to services outside of this council's control, the police, supporting people, youth services, those for the elderly, will inevitably put pressure on us, particularly in our responsibility for homelessness. But it will be totally wrong to just offer to underwrite everything from which others may decide to withdraw. There is opportunity as well as necessity in re-evaluating what has previously been provided to see if it can be done better and more effectively. And we will need the help and collaboration of partners, for instance, health or adult and children's services, the police. Though, much as we might like to think so, we are not experts in everything. We must ensure we do not recreate duplication and inefficiency by dabbling as over-enthusiastic amateurs. It is still very much a moving picture. And so rather than rushing in to allocate funding to specific project areas without understanding the real needs, we're amalgamating a number of revenue streams, but also increasing the reserve to deal with these aspects by 800,000 to 2 million to ensure that there is both adequate funding and flexibility to meet council priorities in these areas as the demands become clearer. There are, however, a couple of areas where more specific commitments can and I think should be made. This year we have allocated over 800,000 as a pilot for funding the purchase of properties in conjunction with housing association partners to meet the needs of homeless families. Next year we are allocating a further 4 million to continue this policy, but also to take strategic initiatives on long-term provision for the vulnerable. Housing and homelessness remains one of our key priorities, as does ensuring that we keep our residents safe and feeling safe at home and when they go out. This year, Hampshire withdrew its support for their community safety team. In Basingstoke and Deane, the success of our patrol team has been evidenced by the steady falls in the level of crime and of antisocial behaviour. We have therefore taken the decision to take back in-house the management of our community safety patrol officers and to increase the size of the team, increasing the community safety budget by £84,000. Mr Mayor, in total we are allocating an additional 634,000 of revenue to meet new or planned commitments and putting an additional 5.7 million into the capital programme to ensure that our vision of Basingstoke and Deane for the future can be delivered. And we are doing this whilst keeping council tax unchanged for the 6th consecutive year. This budget builds in the level of resource to meet the challenges of today, but recognises that this is a rapidly changing world with a great deal of uncertainty, and therefore provides the flexibility to meet the new challenges that will emerge in the coming year. Most importantly, it maintains the basis of good management and sound investment that will secure a better future for the residents of Basingstoke and Deane. Our vision is already beginning to take shape. We need to ensure that it can be delivered to the benefit of all of us who live here. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sanders. I'll now hear from the leader of the Labour Group.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Basingstoke is a great town. We have an amazing borough, but we need to recognise that for many people in our town and borough, getting by and making ends meet isn't easy. It is not easy to afford to live in Basingstoke. It's not easy to afford to find a home in our town, and it's difficult to travel around our town. House prices and rents are amongst the highest in the South East. Many of those who work in the town are struggling with costs of living here. Many thousands of people who work rely on benefits to make ends meet. Many are trapped in zero-hour contracts or part-time work. It doesn't help to enable them to pay their bills, their rent or a mortgage. Those who manage to find somewhere to live in Basingstoke often find themselves at the mercy of letting agents, insecure tenancies and extortionate rents. A few nights ago, I walked into town, a 10-minute walk from my house. I met 6 homeless people on that journey. So many people are talking about how visible homelessness now is in our town and the growing concern and the worry that we have. I've just been sent a note by Councillor Cousins, who said this morning on the way to work there were 3 homeless families of homeless people sleeping by the anvil this morning. There is a growing neglect of people in most need. The county budget for supporting people is going to be cut, and any future funding is very vulnerable. The cuts will be, and already have been, devastating for so many people in Basingstoke. This money was there to support and house the most vulnerable people in our town. We have seen the loss of accommodation and support. 35 units of accommodation lost so far, and more projects and vulnerable next year, and we're going to see more losses. All housing vulnerable people. Many older people in supported housing in our borough have seen their alarm systems cut, unless they can afford to pay for it themselves. The handy person service is gone. The gardening service is gone. To make matters worse, many older people would like to downsize out of the homes they cannot afford to heat, but are trapped because we don't have smaller homes for them to move into. County are now reviewing the housing and support for people with mental health and learning disabilities. I despair to think of the outcome of these reviews. Older people tell us how they feel trapped, isolated, because of the changes to the cuts in buses. Not everyone drives, and buses connect people to vital services, the hospital, GPs, and also just to get out and buy some shopping. A 90-year-old woman in Southam is fighting to keep her very limited bus service. She is only able to get into town now once a week. She has to go in the morning and has a few hours before she has to leave and come home. And that's her only time that she's able to spend outside of the house. This is someone who lives in Southam. It's not a village. This is in the heart of our town. The Labour group continues to fight for better bus services. Another example is an older woman I met in Winklebury who told me that she has to take 2 journeys on the bus to get to see her GP, who is in Popley. That is, of course, when the buses run, and they only run every hour and a half. Basingstoke's appalling public transport system is a major issue, so it beggars belief that in this budget the Cabinet is increasing our shuttle bus fares by 10%, and in some cases 17%. Local people have been in touch with us, concerned about the recent letter sent to them from the council stating that it is minded that they will not meet the criteria for being housed on the housing register. This administration is cutting the housing register, cutting out half of the people on it. Out of sight, out of mind. Those thousands of people still have housing needs. Those people will not disappear. They're still going to be here in Basingstoke. We have housing benefit increasing year on year. It's over 100,000 more this year. That's despite the current government's commitment to reduce housing benefit. Despite all of the housing benefit caps, the introduction of a bedroom tax. We all remember that bedroom tax and what that was said it was going to do. The reduction in local housing allowance rates. Housing benefit bill continues to rise and is now over £49 million. As of January this year, 1,700 landlords in Basingstoke are being paid over £1 million a month in housing benefit. 3/4 of those who are being paid for housing benefit are in work. Housing is simply beyond the reach of working households in our town. And those landlords are the private sector. I'm talking about landlords in the private sector, not in the social sector. The government and this borough are keeping private landlords afloat with housing benefit. Complaints against private landlords has increased by 190%. Injunctions and court orders against landlords have increased by 178%. Yet this Tory administration continues to oppose our request for a mandatory register of landlords. The problems of our urban communities are facing from poorly managed, privately rented housing are growing. The number of empty homes is up nearly 18% on last year. We have over 100 homes that have been empty longer than 2 years. We have seen a 464% increase in the number of the number of homeless households placed in bed and breakfast. Overall, we have seen the cost of bed and breakfast increase 973% in 4 years. We are spending over £120,000 a year on bed and breakfast. A lot of talk has taken place in this chamber about Buckskin. Yet here, in this budget, Buckskin loses out yet again. They were next in the line this coming year for the environmental renewal budget. It's been cut. The money was about making improvements to the fabric of our estates. It was seen year on year, this budget cut. I don't know if you all know, but 4 years ago, that this budget was £500,000. We were told it's on hold while Cabinet looks at new criteria. Last year, there was £130,000 in the budget. This year, there's just £10,000. And when Cabinet have reviewed the criteria, it will only be £90,000. This is at a time when cross-party we are looking at the concerns members and residents have about the needs to invest in improving the condition of our estates. At the same time, the Cabinet fined an extra £30,000 for parish council litter picking. Something just doesn't add up. Something seems quite wrong. Which fees and charges do the Tories look to increase the most? It's those like the bulky waste collection charge. If you have an old sofa you need taken away, it will cost you £21. But if you approve this budget tonight, the price will rise to £25. Fly tipping is on the increase. Increasing collection charges way above inflation show how Tories really do not care about the issues on our estates, or don't understand them. They just don't understand them. While the Tories freeze council tax, local people in Basingstoke are facing additional £250,000 in fees and charges. The government are not helping this budget by reducing the revenue grant by £1 million and by concentrating the land charges service not only has caused by centralising the land charges service, not only has this caused disruption to local businesses, but it will cost this council hundreds of thousands of pounds over the next 2 years. This budget also shows us the true cost of commissioning. It is farcical that the commissioning unit, for example, is charging the housing department £30,000 for the pleasure of being reviewed and put through the COG process. The torturous art and culture COG saved £14,000 this year. but cost over £70,000 to go through the commissioning process in the first place. This administration is obsessed with outsourcing services. 96% of people in the latest council resident survey said that providing homes for local people is the most important council activity. This administration has put great emphasis on this survey, as we heard tonight also from the ex-chief executive. It is a disgrace that 26 Tories then voted against a commitment to support 40% affordable housing on Manydown. They are directly ignoring one of our residents' top priorities. The Tories are going back on a commitment their party gave council tenants when they sold off the council houses. A commitment was made that the money would be used to build more affordable, low-cost housing for local people. That money was not meant to make a private developer rich. The Tories' record on affordable housing is utterly disgraceful. Last year, just 77 affordable homes were built. The year before, just 45. The council's target is 300 a year. We have such a housing crisis in our borough, and we need a firm action on this. Let's be clear, the Manydown Executive Committee comprises of 3 rural Tories who rejected this council's motion passed in this chamber supporting a commitment to 40% affordable housing on Manydown. We are clear, we want infrastructure, we want affordable housing, we want public ownership. We do not support selling Manydown to the highest bidder for a stake of making absolute profit for shareholders of private developers. And yes, I do understand, and I understand there's been discussion that we don't understand what profit is. We do know, Councillor Isaac, we do know what profit is. The community needs to benefit. Basingstoke needs to benefit. The Cabinet are planning to build more housing on Manydown, over 4,000. And what we are saying in this council, and what we're asking as a Labour group, who are you building these houses for? Because it isn't the people of Basingstoke. There is a lot of scaremongering going on about rejecting this budget tonight. We shouldn't fear saying no. If councillors support this budget, they are endorsing the Tories' neglect on low-cost affordable housing, neglect on public transport, neglect on our environment, and neglect on the most in need. If this budget is rejected tonight, in any revised budget that might come forward, we want to see an absolute commitment given to delivery of affordable housing, a commitment to delivering 40% low-cost affordable housing on Manydown. And I just want to pick up on the point, there was 2 points that the leader raised in his speech, and I want to pick up on those. And the absolute success, and I celebrate the success of rail track coming to Basingstoke, but I'd just like to remind those new members in the chamber that might not be aware, but as an opposition, we called in the decision on Gresley Road to build micro-flats, and we were very successful, and I'd like to thank all of those opposition members that supported us in that decision, because if we hadn't have done that, we would have blocks of very small flats and we wouldn't have rail track and the success that that is going to be into our town. So thank you as an opposition for doing that. Can I also talk about, and I really want to pick up on this issue because it makes me so angry, and I think it also is an indication of the different values that we place, really, as a council, you know. And I think the council leader talked about lines of council housing, and I think he used, you know, miles of council houses. I'm just absolutely appalled that you would do that, and in such a way, that almost like scaremongering, but also in such a dirty way, as if that's a dirty word. We've heard that out canvassing at the moment. We've heard that that's what's being said by you as an administration, that that's what we're planning, miles of council houses. That's just appalling that you say that, and you should be ashamed of yourself. And can I just finish by saying, considering everything, this administration and this budget are deeply disappointing, and I will not be supporting this budget.
Thank you, Councillor James. Moving on to Councillor James.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. That was fun. We've heard speeches from the Conservative leader, we've heard speeches from the Labour leader. And it reminds me of that 1970s song by Steelers Wheel. Clowns to the left of me, jokers to the right, here I am stuck in the middle with you. Now tonight the council leader has broken with tradition. In years gone by, the mayor of the day has invited the leader to stand up and tell us all about all the good things that he's achieved over the last year, all the good things in his budget, and all the good things he plans to do. And the leader's always stood up and said, I'll be brief. And that kind of tells the story. But as he's broken with that tradition, so will I. Rather than make a speech that divides us, I shall try and make a speech that brings us all together. I will start by reviewing our progress. Now, the council leader mentions the local plan, something I've supported. What he forgot to mention was it was timetabled for adoption in 2011. The proper planning of this borough's future is critical and should have been a priority for a planning authority. We're now 4 years behind schedule. And frankly, I'm bored of hearing the words draft local plan. In every piece of paper we get, every committee we go to, every council meeting, the draft local plan. Now in business, when you get very bored of something, it gets rebranded. It gets relaunched and it gets given a new name. And I think our draft local plan has reached that point. So I thought we could give it a new name. Now I've considered a number of options. Firstly, and perhaps the obvious option, was to name it after our new chief executive. But I understand there's copyright issues calling your local plan Barratt Homes. Secondly, I thought I'd name it after the style of the portfolio holder and the way he's dealt with dissent in his own party. But that would have made it Wimpy Homes. So instead, I hope it becomes the adopted local plan. I've lost my place. Thank you. We could have done this by now had we not wasted those years with the Tories pretending that 400 homes a year or 594 homes a year were realistic. It took them years and years to agree that the Liberal Democrats were right all along. And of course it's relevant to this budget debate given the mounting cost of lost planning appeals. Money we'd rather spend on services is instead spent on lawyers. But there is some genuine good progress. Mr. Mayor, the 19th century was all about property investment. The 20th century was about financial investments. The 21st century is all about green investment. Sadly, we've had a 21st century council run by a 19th century cabinet. But things are changing now. When I recently attended a member briefing on alternative investment strategy, I felt like I'd heard it all before. And I had. It was my 2011 budget speech. The council are now putting effort into investment in green energy. We're at a place we should have been 4 or 5 years ago. And early indications based on this council's own research suggest a return of 9% is not unrealistic. Now you compare that to the 2% for finance, and the years wasted not doing this have cost this borough that 7% difference. So had we invested £20 million when the Lib Dems proposed it, we'd have increased our revenue by £1.4 million. So when you hear Tories seeking reward for freezing council tax, I will remind them and our residents that had they listened to the Liberal Democrats, cutting council tax by 20% would have been a viable option. It has cost the taxpayers a lot of money waiting for them to agree with the Liberal Democrats. So whenever a Conservative stands up to say we've frozen council tax, what they're really saying is we're 20% more expensive than the Liberal Democrats and we're actually proud of it. For this authority, freezing council tax is a failure. The Tories have long claimed they're a safe pair of hands, the safe guardians of public finance, and the claim is now in tatters. If you add up the cost of those lost planning appeals, the overspend on the MALs, and the missed opportunities in green energy investment, then far from being safe with our money, I'm not sure we can afford them to carry on. Tonight we are faced with limited budget choices. The constraints upon this budget have been imposed by the Conservatives themselves. What is clear, though, is whether it's housing, investment or green energy, the Conservatives are finally agreeing with the Liberal Democrats. In 2010, there was a new fashion rage. I agree with Nick badges, after the Labour leader said, I agree with Nick. In 2015, the Tories are saying, I agree with Gavin. But I haven't made any badges. I was trying to think of one thing the Cabinet have achieved that I didn't ask them to. And I found something. Mr Mayor, I've been to a number of Cabinet meetings this year, and I used to find getting angry very, very difficult. But now it just comes absolutely naturally. What all this proves is we can achieve so much more when we work together. Look at national government. As mentioned earlier, the number of people stuck on job seekers allowance in this borough was 2,949 when the coalition came to power. It's fallen to 898. That's the lowest January figure since 2001. The number of young people on job seekers allowance has fallen from 710 in 2010 to 115 now. That figure has never been lower. Hardly surprising when nearly 5,000 apprenticeships have been created, nearly 4,000 businesses have started in the borough since the coalition took over. And even better news for our residents is that wages are now increasing 5 times faster than prices, according to the latest figures. Now, I expect Conservatives and Liberal Democrats will spend the next few months arguing over who is responsible for the stronger economy. But for most of us, a fairer society is far more important. And as everyone seems to be bringing up statistics about the borough, I've got some of my own. Mr Mayor, the increased tax threshold means that 6,000 lowest earners in the borough have been taken out of tax altogether. And I think we can agree that's fairer. And 86,000 families on average incomes have had their tax reduced by £800. These are the same people that suffered a tax increase when the lowest rate of tax was abolished under the previous government. So typical families are paying less tax than before. I think we can all agree that's much fairer. The top rate of income tax has been higher under every year of the coalition than under any full year of the Labour government. So the highest earners are paying more tax than they were before. And I think we can all agree that's fairer. But the richest don't get pay slips. They're not concerned with income tax, but capital gains tax. This was 18% under Labour. Higher rate taxpayers now pay 28%. So the very rich are paying more under the coalition than they ever did under Labour. And we all agree that's fairer. And of course, what about those who have accountants to exploit the tax loopholes? An extra £9 billion is now being raised as we busily try and close those loopholes. That's £9 billion that was tax evaded under Labour that is now supporting the NHS and welfare, including the residents of Basingstoke. And Mr Mayor, a couple of hours ago, 4,200 children in the borough were offered free school meals. Labour spent 13 years talking about them, the Liberal Democrats are serving them. Doesn't that sound fairer? School funding has been improved. An extra £10 million has come to schools in the borough via the pupil premium, targeted at children from the most disadvantaged backgrounds, so every child can achieve their full potential. I know we all agree that's fairer because Ed Miliband now says he backs the policy. And of course, Mr Mayor, the triple lock means that pension increases will never fall below inflation, wage increases or 2.5%. I think we can all agree that's fairer. But of course, tonight it's about what we can achieve locally and the things we could do to improve. It affects people in the borough. Some of the hottest topics faced by this council over past years have not been under the direct control of this authority. Bus services cut to shreds. I can't fault the efforts of the portfolio holder, but there's been very little action from the county. Supporting people and youth services, all party criticism from this chamber, but at best, partial short-term deferral from the county. The county council is no longer an authority that does things for you, but one that does things to you. It's no longer a partnership, but a very lopsided relationship. We've spent some time over the last year looking at commissioning. It's always a puzzle to us on this side of the chamber that the council leader gets up and tells us that we deliver great services, and then in the next breath says we want someone else to do them. But we need to look at reverse commissioning. What county council functions could we deliver ourselves if we were handed the budget? The county talk about localism, let's see it. If they apply the principle that suggests that more central government functions should go to County Hall, then how can they resist handing more money, more power to the districts? In terms of green energy, the council are talking about solar, but solar's not the only show in town. Our ring road system leaves pedestrian-free roundabouts and buffers such as those on the approach to the Black Dam roundabout. Could these spaces offer a location for wind turbines to generate more revenue and also help the climate change in the borough? And with some 80% of the borough being rural, there must be somewhere to embrace wind power. And what are we doing to plan for a growing and prosperous borough? There is no magic wand or wallet to resolve the issue of a town where people feel driving is the only option. We need to explore a park and ride site near Junction 7 of the M3. Not only is it essential to reduce the strain on the A30 and Brighton Hill roundabout, it will also mean a guaranteed public transport system that goes right past the front doors of the proposed critical care unit. Buses that, for the sake of a few hundred metres, will be able to connect the proposed cemetery site with the town it serves. It's this kind of forward planning that many councillors talk about when expressing concern about development, but it doesn't seem to be mentioned in the budget. And as we talk about development, we do have to, of course, mention affordable homes. Last year, as you've heard earlier, a target of 300, a yield of 77. In fact, far from achieving 40% affordable homes as our policy requires, we struggle to get to 15%. There's very limited money in the budget. In fact, I could only find an extra 5 possible homes for next year. Now, of course, it's absolutely vital that affordable homes are delivered by developers. We cannot fund them all. But it would only be right to have some provision that we can put in place so where it is genuinely on some of the rural sites and some of the brownfield sites, it's genuinely impossible to get 40%, that we can jump in and help out. And there may be strategic sites where we believe that 40% isn't enough and we could do more. We also need to improve the health and reduce emissions. We need to become a cycle-friendly town, and that doesn't mean we have to stop being a car-friendly town. Those who have talked about cycle lanes in the past have got a point, but they have missed the main point. Cycling from A to B is not a major problem. It's cycling back to A when your bike was stolen whilst you were at B. 218 bicycle thefts in the borough were reported to the police last year. That's an increase, excluding those that were lost in burglaries, and I'm still waiting for figures from British Transport Police. We need to do more. The town centre, the leisure park, district centres and the main public transport hubs all require safer and secure cycle storage. We need to be working on solutions to this and putting some money into it, but I can't see anything in the budget. Now, Mr. Mayor, I'd always intended to summarise my budget speech through the medium of verse. And originally I wrote a poem about UKIP. However, I've been advised that it would be unsuitable before the watershed, and that I can't share it until we can be sure that no children are watching the webcast and older councillors are definitely asleep. So we may come back to it later, but for now I come up with this. Basingstoke and Dean Council, led by Captain Clive. Nothing is safe from his cuts, not even Basingstoke Live. We're in the age of austerity. His approach is let's go lean. He could have done so much more had he chosen to go green. Now some have suggested he's past it. They've argued he's over the hill. But we've always defended him because the alternative was Renil. Lack of courage or ideas, I'm not sure from where his problem stems, but it's clear he does his best work when he's listened to us Lib Dems. He's presented a nothing budget. It simply isn't right. I may support him one day, but I'm abstaining tonight. There's a simple rule of good governance, and it isn't very long. Ask, do the Lib Dems agree with you? If not, you're probably wrong.
Thank you, Councillor James. Councillor Bierman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, it's very easy. The Lib Dems obviously do agree with me and us, I'd like to think. So off we go. I am sure that anyway that I'll have the full attention of some of the Conservatives as they look for material to rearrange their out-of-touch propaganda sheets. But for those receptive to possible alternative scenarios, I will share what I believe to be worthy of consideration. I shall not be putting forward a stream of detailed calculations as, in the absence of a political assistant, I do not have the necessary resources. I can, however, put forward a few basic concepts, and it won't be a surprise to many that I'll start with the Green Investment Fund. And by starting with that, I wish to pay a compliment to the portfolio holder, because this fund was seriously stagnant for a long time, and with the new portfolio holder, Councillor Eachus, not only has it started to move forward in a pretty positive way, it's also showing signs of being inclusive. Councillor Eachus has been to the climate change panel, joined in the debate, listened to what was going on, and it was a real refreshing experience that a lot of what was discussed there was then interpreted. And whilst she is not totally alone in this way of moving forward. It is a good example, and only a couple of other portfolio holders are quite so inclusive in their behaviour, and I hope it will be a lesson for others as we move forward. As I say, the Green Investment Fund activities are welcome. Less welcome is the lamentable performance in terms of the solar panels, which was introduced as a topic by one Martin Heath quite some time ago, addressing the then, what was it called at that time? Some overview committee, it's changed its name so many times since, saying we could save so much money by investing in these panels rather than leaving the money somewhat stagnant in the banks. And how have we progressed? We've played around at the edges and done very, very little. Now, there were some hiccups, but with a proper commitment to this as an idea, we should have been very much further forward, and it's been a great disappointment and not a prudent way to deal with our resources. I'm glad that we have now got a tree maintenance reserve. I don't believe, as I have previously indicated, it's anywhere near as much, and there's at least one councillor here who might agree with that in view of his earlier remarks. It is partly a question of resource, although that particular problem was not so much resource as arboricultural considerations, I believe. But what we have in the reserve is nowhere near enough in the long term to deal with what we are faced with as these trees continue to grow, and we have not just hundreds but thousands causing problems in the years to come. So that reserve needs to be seriously increased. Talking about growth, unwelcome growth, we also have a problem with bushes on footpaths and the likes. It must be one of the topics that I get the most complaints about. We're trying to encourage people to take their children to school by walking, and in many cases it's a serious obstacle course just because the bushes aren't being maintained properly. Now, I fully appreciate that in some cases the bushes are not in the ownership of the borough or the county, but there are measures that can be taken if householders are not being responsible in that respect to deal with the bushes, and we're not doing it vigorously enough. And I really think this is something we should be addressing. I understand that when we are not cutting back those that we can cut back quickly enough, it's a question of staff resources. Now, why on earth aren't we investing in more staff resources to take on this particular topic that is of massive interest to residents? Absolutely no doubt. I would say second only to planning issues in my ward, this is the most talked about and the most often complained about topic. Talking about environmental matters, I was pleased to hear the leader of the Lib Dems actually refer to it, because it's not a very sexy topic, but it's ever so important, and that is air quality. Winton Square, below the EU standards. What are we doing about it? Nothing, exactly so. And the statistics show that poor air quality, it results in more fatalities than do road deaths from car impact and the like. Why do we, just because it's not so immediately obvious, ignore this very important topic? And I would like to see a concerted effort to do something about air quality around our borough. Of course, one way of dealing with it, I'm glad again the Lib Dems are learning this, is to attack the problem of unfriendly cycling circumstances. I hope I have proven my will to set an example in that respect, but I don't blame people for shying away from using their bicycles for commuting, because the dangers and discomfort that they are faced with in so doing is massive. And here we are, we're doing major engineering works on Basing View, but what are we doing about one of the most cycle and friendly roundabouts in the borough, Eastrop Roundabout? We're making it worse when it comes to the point. It is not going to bring about this multi-million-pound scheme any improvements for cyclists in a really, truly dangerous location. Some people might have, some years ago, read a report where I went round with the then well, the ongoing chief reporter of the Gazette. And she was scared out of her wits approaching the Eastrop roundabout because there isn't a safe route to cycle. And here we are saying we're such a wonderful borough and we can't deal with little matters like that. We've invested in a whole range of new cycle parking racks and stands in locations to make this centre of town more friendly. But who did those who were installing the racks talk to about the location and design of these particular facilities? Nobody that I am aware of in this council, no members in this council, nor did they talk even to the newly formed Basingstoke Cycle Group. Now you'd think that there would be a point in communicating with those people who have the experience and who use these things before you start investing in what will in part be white elephants because they're in the wrong locations or don't offer the proper protection for cycles. So, you know, let's talk to the people who are the users, and I would say in cycling terms, even more importantly, the potential users. And if anybody has any doubt about the massive potential, they only need to look at what's happened at Basingstoke railway station. When I first used to park my bike there to go to London and the like, there were a couple of racks at the back of the station, and they weren't even full. Now, they've got so many racks around the station, some might say you can hardly get in there. They're all overflowing, and there's demand for even more. So if you make the proper provision, it will be used. Even the one at the entrance to the Dean's building, which was once described as Beerman's white elephant or worse, was unused to start with, but because it was a sensible facility in a sensible location, there are times, again, you can't get in to use it because it's popular, because it's sensible, and it's in the right place, and it's generally secure, although I think Mr. Donnet might disagree with that, or somebody had a mishap there. Talking about alternative transport, if alternative it be, let me just mention Chinham Railway Station. Now, this is not just a parochial remark. Anybody travelling up the A33 on a regular basis will agree that there's a problem there. And the potential relief for some of the traffic on the A33 is obviously a rail station. Now, this has been in discussion for almost as long as I've been a councillor, so that's a long time. In fact, longer actually, because Chief Executive, about 5, had it as a little hobby horse of his. But it was never formal policy at that stage. How much money have we got in a reserve for Chinham Railway Station? Well, it's not very big, is it? Like nothing. And before Network Rail are likely to do something, they need some confidence that there's a belief in a facility like this. They want to see some money on the table, that there's a commitment. And we've said fine words, but we're not showing the commitment because a fund that we used to have was dissolved some time ago, and we've never replenished it, even though this is a good opportunity and a good time to be looking at that sort of thing. So that's one area where there should be a reserve, Council Leader, in my view. I'd also like to have seen some big ideas in our budget. One that I will mention, I appreciate that this is a very big idea. I keep mentioning it, and I'm therefore not surprised with the outcome, which is nothing when I do mention it. But I will still mention it because I think it's such a great thing. If we want this town to be recognised as an interest location to visit, a location of interest to visit, we need to do something about the canal. I believe the canal should, in due course, come into the town centre. I've said that before. I know it has a lot of support from a lot of people. It's not an easy thing to do. It will cost a lot of money. I have absolutely no doubt that there will be a return on that particular investment. If you look at the Docklands in London, they, because of the water aspect, are very popular. Manchester and Salford docks, because of the docks. Water, for whatever reason, is a psychological draw and makes a place pleasant and attractive. And the canal, Basingstoke Canal, remember, coming into the centre, even if we only started with a bit of the canal in Eastrop Park, would be a step in the right direction. And I really would like to see that big idea included. In drawing to a close, I too wish to say how, whilst outsourcing has a place here, it should not be the preferred option when one ignores all else. The cheapest is not necessarily the best. And you know, again, look to things like British Rail and other services on a national level, prisons, many hospitals, many schools, where people are thinking, oh, wait dear, why did we do that particular joint venture? We're having to pay for it now because the service is so bad and it's costing us twice as much. When we've done something well, as has been said, we're talking, the leaders saying how well we're doing on so many things, why on earth throw that away to others? And I would just sadly finish on the note of saying there have been a lot of mistakes in the recent years, and I don't think we can afford to be patting ourselves on the back too much. I mention many down because it has cost us an arm and a leg, and in terms of getting to where we are. It's cost us an arm and a leg because of the judicial review, but it's also cost us even more because of the absence of a local plan, and in the absence of a local plan, all the stupid planning applications that have come in that we have rightly resisted on planning grounds, because for anybody who says they've been resisted on NIMBY grounds, I point to the fact that on most refusals from the DC committee, it's been close to unanimous, because not just the councillors immediately affected, but those further remote thought that the plans didn't stack up in terms of sound planning. And it's costing us now because there's this nonsense requirement to have houses wherever they go, in whatever style, whatever quality, and we will live to regret it in the future. We will, as was mentioned, suffer from the pickles effect and be in a pickle for many years to come. The local plan has cost us a lot now, as I say, for the reasons I've mentioned. And then we have nonsenses like the Bramley Station pedestrian bridge, where we are gone through a process, a totally flawed process. We're talking about putting money together before we've got the facts together, putting money aside for a very flawed process that's not locally supported. And I suspect there might be others who can elaborate on that, so I'll say no more. We need to be sure that we're using the LIFT funds and New Homes bonus and everything for the benefit of the borough, and do it in a consensus fashion. And I still regret the fact that there's a feeling, it seems to me, on the side of the administration that anybody who opposes things coming forward is doing it for political reasons. I would like to suggest a little good grace and accept that other people might have good ideas, and perhaps even in some cases better ideas, and be willing to take some of those ideas on board in a consensual manner. And I don't see the proper heart in doing that yet, and I would like to see that change, and I don't believe that this budget reflects that type of approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bierman. At this point, I would be asking the leader of the UKIP group to make a budget speech. Absolutely not. However, there are some things you can't do by email. Councillor Keating is absolutely correct. Could I now have a proposer for the recommendation?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to propose a recommendation.
Is that seconded?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to reserve my right to speak as well.
I will now open the debate. Councillor Harvey. Councillor Harvey, if you wish to speak. At which point would you like to present your amendment? Do it now, by all means.
Do it now, thank you. I'm in your hands, Mr. Mayor. It's on the timetable, it's in your hands. Mr. Mayor, 96% of the people in Basingstoke, in the residents' survey in Basingstoke and Dean, said that providing homes for local people is a top priority. We recognise that there is a housing crisis in Basingstoke, and we know that the council can and should lead and make a huge difference using its resources to invest in building homes that will generate a return to the taxpayer, but also local homes for local people, in the sense that many older people want to downsize, and many young families are desperate to start in a new home. We would use the £25 million working with partners who share our social agenda to deliver low-cost, affordable homes. We would invest in young people through backing apprenticeships. We know that the priority in Basingstoke for apprenticeships is incentives for employers to increase their recruitment of more apprentices, and working with partners to increase the minimum wage of apprentices. We want grants to support employers with over 19s for funding their fees for apprenticeships. We want to support higher apprenticeships, the funding of grants to support employers with HNC costs, something that is a priority of our LEP. We want funding to increase the IEG awareness of parents and schools and colleges, another LEP priority, to promote the benefits of higher education through vocational apprenticeship learning. We want funding to encourage employers to support apprenticeship delivery in the college, in our BCOT college, releasing industry experts to support the curriculum, and also employers' forums to share best practice and build a network of employers promoting apprenticeships. There is a huge untapped agenda around apprenticeships. We will support our small and medium-sized businesses. We want to because they're the lifeblood of our local economy. We want to help them grow and develop. We want businesses employing people on good wages with skills and innovation that drive our economy. But it's about the kind of jobs that we create, and it's in particular tackling 0 hours contracts. We also recognise the impact of welfare changes. It's been huge on so many people, often the most vulnerable in our community. And we see the human cost in the government's cuts to welfare reform, the human cost of the county's savage cuts to supporting people. Instead of saying we could, or we might, or we need to keep it flexible, we need to see action by addressing the impacts of supporting people and welfare changes. We want an identified budget that will support people who are directly affected by welfare changes, homelessness, and supporting people cuts. And it needs to be the start, because in future years we're going to need to see ongoing revenue support to meet the needs of the most vulnerable in our borough. Again, this is a huge agenda that we have to address. Buses and public transport. It's such a major issue. Getting around the town and our borough matters to our economy, and it matters to people's health and well-being. For example, young people cite that safe public transport is one of their most important issues. So we'd like to buy 5 electric hopper buses that would operate on routes connecting communities like Old Basing, Chinham and Beggarwood. Again, this council can take the lead for these communities, showing that we can do something. Those green hopper buses would support the school runs, people getting to their GPs in the hospital, that help local businesses connect to our local out-of-business parks and the town centre. And we could do a lot more to support the nighttime economy and evening public transport. We want to see a real drive to bring our partners on board on this. The hospital, the schools, our colleges, our businesses, because we want to pool their transport budgets with us to deliver something that is quite needed in our town on public transport. We also want access to primary health care, because it's such a problem for so many people. Time and again, we hear people talk about the cost and the tortuous journeys they take, getting from one side of the town to the other to see their GP when they are feeling unwell. And we know that the Southam surgery was a success, and it generates a return in income to this council. So communities like Buckskin and Winkleberry and Hatch Warren, who are not served directly by GP services, we need to invest in their local health care. And we have a model that works. So positively, why aren't we doing more to deliver on it? And we're serious about investing directly in solar power and other renewable energy, because it makes a return on the investment this year, but importantly contributes to reducing our carbon footprint. And we also want to indulge home insulation grants to those households that can't afford to heat their home, by helping those people reduce their bills but also their carbon footprint. And with an ageing housing stock in Basingstoke, this is an issue we will need to address, and the council can and should take a lead. And we should look at our investment portfolio in the future to make far more green investment, far more opportunities, not just for solar power, but other renewable energies as well. Our amendment, Mr Mayor, is just the beginning of trying to focus this council on the issues that we know matter to people in Basingstoke and Dean.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Wonderful timing yet again. 5 minutes spot on. Is that seconded? Right, I will now open the debate on the amendment. And my first speaker is Councillor Gavin James.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I was looking forward to Labour's amendment, an opportunity to improve the budget. Then I read it. It does nothing to alter the revenue budget. At best, it gives reserve counts a different name. Dig deeper and it gets worse. I'll run through the amendment line by line. Now, I've got nothing against some of the smaller items within the amendment. The invest in small business and invest in work is already covered by the existing Economic Development and Council Priorities Reserve. There's nothing to stop good schemes coming forward and then being funded through that reserve. Unlike the Green Reserve, the amendment seems to change very little to what's already available in the existing reserve. In supporting people, I think Labour have got confused. Their proposal seems to suggest they'll just pick up the funding where county left off and it will keep the services going for a few months. Unfortunately, it's not that simple. Supporting people will require ongoing spending. It needs a long-term solution, making sure the right people get the right support in the right accommodation through the right funding streams. It's a revenue issue, not a one-off spending issue. Then there's the bigger items. I absolutely support the intention to supply more affordable housing. I think it's very noble. I don't want to send a message, though, to the developers that you don't have to do it anymore because we've got 25 million. I want developers to provide the 40% affordable housing, and as I mentioned in my main budget speech, to have some funding available where, for strategic reasons, we may want more. I fear this 25 million will simply move directly from our reserves to developers' profits. The main problem I have with the whole 25 million, of course, is, as I mentioned in the main budget speech, it's our alternative investment capital reserve, and a lot of it is being earmarked for green energy investment. I accept Labour have no real interest in the environment, but it's investment that will secure the revenue for the council needs in future years to provide services such as supporting people. After 4 years persuading the Conservatives to invest in green energy, I can't possibly support an amendment that cancels it. In terms of public transport, as we know, this is a county council matter. Investing in buses still needs someone to drive them. You can buy the best, flashiest hopper buses you can get, but unless you've got a revenue budget to continue to subsidise them into the future, all you've got is some new buses that you have to hand over to Stagecoach. And 2 million for healthcare services does require doctors. Again, this requires revenue or a prior agreement from the NHS. There must be a reason why the Hatchwarren surgery closed to merge with the South Ham surgery. I don't think this council should be competing with the NHS. In summary, Mr Mayor, the Labour PPC wants to scrap investment in green energy, starve the council of revenue, which will result in cuts later on, spend £2 million on surgeries that won't open, and give £1 million of taxpayers' money to Stagecoach. I get the impression he moved this amendment to put headlines in his leaflets. Now I've heard it, he's putting headlines in mine.
Thank you for that. Councillor Joe Wardina.
Mr Mayor, I'm always talking about the Conservatives' long-term economic plan, locally and nationally. It's a good one. Well, for once, let me talk about Labour's plan, if you can call it that. Last night, Labour released a party election broadcast which contained yet another economic plan, their 9th under Ed Miliband. It seems at the moment that barely a week goes by without Ed Miliband launching another economic plan. In the past few months, we've seen a 10-point cost of living contract, which has been scrapped, a 5-point plan for growth, which has been forgotten, and a 6-point plan for Britain's future, which no one can remember. Ed Miliband can launch as many plans as he likes, but we all know his real intention: to borrow more, spend more, and tax more. That is his true plan if he gets into Downing Street, and hard-working taxpayers would pay the price. That's worrying for our country. Now, if Labour took a different approach locally, I'd applaud them for it. The trouble is, they haven't. Labour want to put £25 million of council taxpayers' money into council housing. Not a single person that I've spoken to on the doorstep tells me that that is what they want to see. Overall, Labour want to use £32 million of council taxpayers' money on sound bites. The legendary Gordon Brown, the architect of Labour's Great Recession, spending without a second thought, was a big fan of investment. It seems that the Labour Party here in Basingstoke-and-Deane is a fan of Gordon Brown's economic policy. And that's the choice tonight, a choice between an administration that has frozen the council tax for 5 years, created a positive environment for new businesses across the borough. John Lewis, Waitrose and Network Rail on Basing View, Air Kicks and Costa Coffee at the Leisure Park, Lidl and Dunelm near Chinham, and Bombay Sapphire at Leverstoke Mill. Businesses want to come here, providing more jobs for local people. 1.8 million people are back in work since 2010, and that's led to unemployment here that's lower than pre-recession levels. And let's be clear on the supposed 0 hours contracts. The average number of hours worked is 22 hours a week. It's no wonder that with that record, 96% of residents are happy with the area in which they live. With just over 2 months until the most important election in a generation, the choice for the British people is clearer than ever. Unadulterated economic chaos under Ed Miliband or competence with the Conservatives. In this chamber, that means a clear choice between giving it all up with Labour's tax and spend or securing a better future with the Conservatives. I urge members to vote down Labour's poorly conceived, ideologically driven disaster of a budget amendment. Only the Conservatives will deliver lower bills, more jobs and better facilities through our long-term economic plan. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Isaac.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. How depressing this amendment is for the political life in this borough and the Labour Party's role in Basingstoke local government. At 5:30 in the evening, on the eve of one of the most important decisions for this council, the setting of its annual budget, up pops out of the blue this amendment from Councillor Harvey. Is he really seriously suggesting that this council attempts to reach sound judgments on these changes with zero notice of them? I said it's depressing because a responsible party representing its residents surely should not behave in this way. Over many months during the budget's preparation, Councillor Harvey could have discussed his ideas with me as portfolio holder and or officers, but nothing. Not a murmur of disagreement with the strategy for the £25 million Property and Alternative Investment Fund from Councillor Harvey at the members' advisory panel. Note, a members' panel designed to advise the portfolio holder only a month ago. Why so coy? Why so uncharacteristically shy? Or is he seeking instant headlines because his election campaign is flagging? What are we to make of this attempted stunt, these fag packet proposals? Where is the detailed business?
Councillor Harvey, I'll take it just for the moment. Go ahead.
John, you know full well at that meeting we made clear where our stance was on the affordable housing. Mr. Mayor, we made our point very clear in that meeting. It is not the case. The Cabinet member knows exactly where our stance is on affordable housing and has always been, not just this year but year before as well. That is not the case and he should withdraw that comment.
It was not to the exclusion of everything else. Where is the detailed business case for these changes, an assessment of the financial consequences for our investment returns, an impact on council tax downstream for councillors tonight to be able to consider these proposals? Take just one example, the suggestion that the £25 million Property and Alternative Investment Reserve should be earmarked for affordable housing delivery. Where is the business case? Where is the evidence that Councillor Harvey can obtain, as he claims, financial returns on affordable in line with the investment principles in the existing policy? Though tonight, actually, he does talk about social partners, partners who share our social principles, which probably says it all. I think he would struggle, and I think the returns would be minimal, and this would have a serious impact on our revenues given the size of the fund, £25 million. It could be equivalent to another 1 to 2 pence increase on council tax. The budget report has been carefully and comprehensively prepared and financially stress tested over many months with the expert input of officers. It is the sum of its parts, and to seek to make significant changes to those parts at this late stage risks derailing the balanced budget now and our forecasts for the medium-term financial strategy. Because of the due diligence done, we can with confidence recommend tonight a balanced budget for 15-16, including an unchanged council tax of £104.44p at Band D, and a funded capital budget through to 2018-19. Rigorous statutory requirements have had to be met to get to this point where Council can tonight vote and set a new budget. I quote from the Chief Financial Officer's statutory report at section 12, which reads, "The budget has been constructed following a coordinated and detailed process involving Cabinet, budget holders and finance staff." In a democracy, oppositions are there to challenge and to propose alternatives, but they should do so constructively in the interests of all our residents. It is possible that some of Councillor Harvey's ideas may be worth discussing and investigating, but to plonk them on the table 24 hours before this Council has to make its decision suggests to me that he's not expecting us to take them at all seriously. Under the current Labour leadership, there is no attempt to engage, and my hunch is that the voters will see this manoeuvre for what it is. I've also to ask, where are the voices of the constructive, moderate members of the Labour Party? One of the dismal consequences of this sort of mischief is that it is becoming increasingly difficult to have a sensible dialogue with the party opposite. I will not be voting for this amendment.
Councillor Bierman.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I do need to just start off with somebody who has complained in the past about resolutions being dumped, often without written support, before us. I really think it's unjustified of Councillor Isett to initially say it's just come a few hours before the debate. I certainly, and I don't think I was in any privileged position, had it somewhere near midday, I think it was yesterday, but I've certainly... Well, then I must be in a privileged position. Thank you for privileging me, because I thought it had gone to all members, and I certainly found it interesting. In that case, naughty boys and girls, because I think one does, for important work like this, one does need to have proper warning, to think about it, and to have a meaningful discussion. And whoever fails, I'll be critical of. That said, I think the thrust of the proposed amendment is rather more imaginative. Now, I have to say, I would not, than the basic proposition before us. If it were mine, I would have a different emphasis on it, but I think it has merit, particularly on the housing side. I think it is important that we show our commitment, as we are not doing on Many Down at the moment and in other ways, but that we do believe in helping the housing crisis that we face because of the ridiculous house prices in our area. What I'd be concerned about in this funding is it all going to housing associations, who I look upon as being much the same as plenty of private companies seeking to milk the system with ridiculous salaries for many of the people working there, and causing conflict between different areas of the borough when they have completely different ways of working. One housing association compared with the other. So as I say, I wouldn't like to see this as a subsidy for the housing associations if it were to happen, in the unlikely event it were to happen. Speaking for myself, and I think Councillor Tilbury at least, our solution is council housing. It had the most opportunity for control, and there was no need to there's no need to put in quite the salaries that housing association chiefs seemed to benefit from when it was under council auspices. In closing, I'd just like to say also, I hope that the money, if it were to be put aside, which, as I say, I see as unlikely under the present circumstances, but if it were, I'd just like to put in a little plea for something that we've talked about, again, particularly Councillor Tilbury and myself, and that is funding, or not funding as such, but grants not grants, sorry, try again, what's the word I'm looking for, loans for self-build. That is a great, if one would like, private enterprise type of facility that means that people build homes that they then respect and put a lot of work into, and I think we should be doing much more to encourage and support self-build. So with those provisos, I think the general thrust of where this amendment is going is preferable to what we have on the table in the main resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bierman. I've usually found that speaking for Councillor Tilbury is totally unnecessary. Councillor Regan.
Thank you, Mayor. I love Gavin James. I really do. He never ever misses a... thank you. He never ever misses a chance to defend the Tories. Never a chance given. And he's defending his coalition government, which he cares on about the tax break so much. Well, let's look about the record briefly before I come on to local stuff. I mean, they went into government, put VAT up. Immediately it hurts the poorest in society. And can I mention tuition fees? I mean, what they did with tuition fees? A solemn pledge, £9 grand. And then we have the welfare reform and the infamous bedroom tax. Then they voted through bedroom tax through Parliament, and then a year out from the general election said, we're against it. You know, this is what you've got to say when you sit in the middle of the road and you keep getting run over by Tories. And the other thing is disability benefit cuts. I mean, how could you ever support that? The weakest of society had the benefits cuts. And who was the minister who did it? Maria Miller. I wonder if she had times when she was trying to defend her expenses. And think about this so-called cut in income tax for the lowest in society. They didn't, they cut it for the top. They cut the income tax from 50% to 45%. So put some power back in, money in the power back into the hands of people. The old issue of austerity was to actually to make the rest of us pay for the most powerful mistakes. Not really a mistake. They just, instead of generating things to make, they generated debt. And you know, this is Councillor Gilman's so-called Conservative plan. The plan is to make the rest of us pay for the most rich in society's mistakes, and that is the whole aim, to defend the neoliberal economic agenda that's failed massively over the last 30 years. That's why we've got no public transport in terms of buses, because they were all privatised and deregulated. That's why we've had this constant drive to outsourcing, which eventually leads to not being able to fill holes in the road in, and now which are cutting the edges. And now we'll go back to the actual motion. And I mean, 51 years ago, this May, I moved to Basingstoke. It's a 13-year-old. My good old mate here, Councillor Tony Jones, did the same. Stag Hill, Cleaver Road, Southend boys, and I'm still there, but he deserted. But there were council houses, massive council houses. We had roads and roads and roads of them, to quote the leader. And you know, people loved them. Well, they did love them. Do you know what they did in the end? They bought them. They loved them so much. Yeah, I should tell my neighbours now. All of them have lived there for 50 years. I mean, under the right to buy, I respect what you're going to say. But it's, I should tell my neighbours that, you know, the Tories don't want your children, your grandchildren, to have houses that they can afford. Because over the last 30 years of neoliberalism, privatisation, it's been an insidious shift from state or council-run houses to private rented. There's no consequences. The rents have shot through the roof, and so have house prices. So we're now, especially here in the southeast of England, we're being totally priced out. And generational rent, not generational rent, it's generation staying with mum and dad. So we formulated this amendment actually to make sure the money goes towards council houses. And it's an actual disgrace that they're still, sorry? Right. It's an actual disgrace that about Manidown. There is an old, great chunk of land that is ours, that we can actually, what we used to do in the past, build council houses for the waiting list. We didn't gerrymander the waiting list. We actually built houses of them and got them down. I even got one myself 40 years ago, and I didn't buy it. But so I will, you know, I will be voting for this amendment as it starts to address the real needs of this town. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, point of personal explanation. I was named by Councillor Regan. I was named by Councillor Regan a minute ago.
Quiet, please. Is there a point of clarification you wish to make?
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to make the point that I at no point said what Councillor Regan said, and I agree with Gavin in saying that income tax has been cut for 26 million people, with a typical income tax cut of £705 since 2010. So that is the lowest paid people getting tax cuts.
Councillor Pearce, it's your opportunity.
I need to put right a few things, I think. Interesting waste of time referring to Ed Miliband. Not that he's a waste of time, but it's wasting this council's time. And I'd also like to point out, those of you that don't believe Gordon Brown was a good economist, it's well accepted that Gordon Brown handled the economy of this country very, very well. It has been reported in the Senate in the United States that we handled it better than they did. So, you know, Gordon Brown isn't all bad. I'm interested in Councillor Isaac's suggestion that we should have a chat with him. Personally, I accept that I've had a number of chats with him and they've been very useful, but we had a whole scrutiny committee to discuss some issues on his portfolio. 4.5 hours of scrutiny committee, and that's quite a big chat, Councillor Isaac, and you sat in Cabinet and in approximately 4 seconds dismissed the views of all the people that went to that scrutiny committee and said you had heard nothing new. So, yes, I may personally have a chat with Councillor Isaac, but I don't see the point in anybody else doing so for some unknown reason. One of the problems that we're missing out here, and I think we're afraid. I think we're afraid to look at it. Indexes of multiple deprivation are the highest in Hampshire in Basingstoke. Education, skills and training deprivation domain, also one of the highest levels in Basingstoke. Health deprivation in Buckskin, one of the highest in the county. And children and young people deprivation subdomain, again in Basingstoke, 20% most deprived. We are not addressing the issue of the socially deprived in this town, and we are allowing the gap to get bigger. You put a £112,500 reduction in the homelessness budget with no real plans to build houses. Homelessness is rising, funding reducing. And that's, I think, why the suggestion of a £25 million expenditure came up, because we couldn't see where new houses were going to come from, and we know that we've got 3,000 people on the waiting list. We're not enabling the elderly to downsize where they want to. We're not enabling young people into housing at a realistic price. £750,000 for youth, invest to work. We would like to see the focus for young people who have been affected by benefit changes. Invest to support small businesses, again, getting people back into work. And that, I accept, we've got a brilliant record. We've got one of the lowest levels of unemployment in the country, and we should be proud of it. But where there are the unemployed, they're in those socially deprived areas, and these people's lives are poor by anybody's standards in this room. There's nobody in this room now who has such a poor life as those socially deprived people, and we're ignoring them. And £500,000 investment in supporting people for the homeless. Why would you not want to do that? Why would you not want to support the homeless? It just beggars my belief. I vote for this amendment, and I really think some of you might think again and vote with us.
Thank you, Councillor Pearce. Councillor Harvey, can you sum up?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Debate's kind of gone the way I expected it to. I'd like to just bring it back to Basingstoke, if I could, please, and to the people of our borough, because that's actually what we're in this room to be talking about. This is the budget that will affect their lives for the next 12 months, the next 3 years, in your programme that you're proposing. What are we seeking to do here? Housing. We're saying that this council has a role in the delivery of housing in this borough to work with partners, yes, our social landlords, but others who will work with us to our principles, to the principles that people want, which is low-cost housing. You flogged the council houses in 1995 and you made the money that this council has lived off of all these years. And the Tory party at the time made the people of Basingstoke a promise. We will use that money to build affordable housing. You made that promise. It was in the document that went out during the referendum that was won in a very, very close vote. It's there in black and white, so don't shake your heads, because it's there. And we can dig it out, thanks to Councillor Tilbury, and bring it along and show you it. The point is this. If councils like Lib Dem Cambridge, that was, pushing forward a £12 million programme in housing, for affordable housing, or Harrogate for that matter, can do it. If Labour councils in London can do it, if Tory councils like South Cambridgeshire can do it, then we can do it, particularly when we have such an issue of housing crisis in this town. Talk about welfare for a moment. Talk about Sandringham Court. Talk about Joshua Tree. Talk about why you've been sat in that map having that conversation. And talk about the people's lives that have been hit by the cuts. All right, that's the truth of the matter. Why would you not want to create a revenue and then continue to reinforce it with ongoing support? Because you're going to need that if we're going to take this issue seriously. That's why there are disabled people in our town who have been hit by the bedroom tax in the way they have and don't get discretionary support, don't get any sympathy, struggle to hang on with debt. And I've asked the officers if there's things that we can do to help them, and there's nothing we can do to help them because the legislation is so tight. It is so discriminatory. And I've talked to people about the apprenticeships. I've asked the professionals, what can we do for young people in this town that would make a difference? I've talked to the young people themselves. And they say consistently that apprenticeships are fine, but they don't pay, they don't keep you, particularly when you scrap the EMA. I've spoken to the people at Queen Mary's College about this issue, when they tell me that 0 hours contracts really do impact on their life chances and their jobs and career opportunities, when they struggle to find work in this town, and when they get it, it doesn't pay enough to keep a roof over their head. I've talked to the 35-year-olds in Brighton Hill who are living at home with their mums and dads because they can't afford, at 35, to get a house in this town. What are we doing about that? We're very good at creating reserves, and we're very good at doing all the political speeches, and we're very good at praising ourselves in the budget. What we don't do, really, is actually deliver for the most of the people in our town on their issues. That's something I don't think we do as a council. And I just wish for once. This amendment is meant with all of that. It's meant with all of that, yes, emotion, yes, seriousness, yes, vigour, because I don't care about what happens to people in this town. I'm sure you all do as well. I'm not saying you don't. But I want to see some action. And when it comes to the green agenda, when it comes to solar power, wind power, when it comes to any of those renewables, I don't want to wait 3 or 4 or 5 years for somebody to come up with a plan that might in 15 years give us a return. We can do it. You've shown us we can do it. You've said it yourselves. There are things that we can do and investments we can make, as other authorities are doing, with our resources to bring that income generation forward. And it's about income generation. And it's about reprofiling our investments. Not just the 25 million, but looking at that investment portfolio for a genuine return that can make up for the £1 million the government have taken off of us in a revenue grant, that can make up for all the other losses we're sustaining in this authority. There's such an agenda here. We could be so much more bold than we are for the people's issues that are really out there. That's the way we're coming from. It's as simple as that. That's where we're coming from. And that's why I will be supporting this amendment.
Right, I will beat Councillor Keating to it, then we will have a recorded vote. Just to point out, we are voting on 9B at this point, and it's 9B as it's the amendment. The vote is open. Right, we are voting on the amendment to 9B. Everybody voted? Right, we now close the vote. I think that's pretty clear. The amendment is lost. We will now move back to the debate on the substantive motion. And I have got hands coming up all over with Councillor Reid.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Please keep your hands up if you want to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I've got all the hands, so Councillor Reid to start.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. I think I'll wait till everyone's stopped moving around. Right. Too often at budget meetings and financial planning meetings, the very real human element of a council's services can be forgotten, but not, Mr. Mayor, under this administration. This administration has worked hard to freeze council tax again this year, whilst we still maintain our frontline services, which are very much appreciated by our residents. We have cut millions of waste out of this council's finances, left behind by the previous administration. Only as a result of our sound financial planning are we able to give a hand up to those people most in need in our borough, safeguarding the most vulnerable in our community. In this budget, Mr. Mayor, we've made available £4 million for a housing and a homelessness fund, the capital fund. We also have £2 million in a revenue fund. This is particularly important at the moment, given the context of operating under the shadow of supporting people spending reductions from Hampshire and elsewhere. Unfortunately, this evening we have seen an uncosted proposal which was delivered at the 11th hour, which contained a reference to supporting people and a suggestion that 500k would be enough to solve the problem of supporting people. Now, those members who have been serving on the cross-party members advisory panel with me will know that such a sum does not even begin to address the issue. £500,000 is less than half a year's supporting people funding. So for that reason, we have been making sure that we have been looking at this issue extremely seriously. As those members in the panel will know, we have already undertaken a strategic review of the existing services, and we are now embarking on a very high level and wide-ranging look at what we can do to address the issue. So it isn't just a case of having the money available, which through our budgeting and our managing of our finances we have, but it's also a case of looking at what provision we can make and how we can be masters of our own destiny. And that requires a great deal of thought and planning, and that is what we are doing. We have not written something down on the back of an envelope. We have spent a lot of time and a lot of work. We are going to Hampshire and trying to get them to engage with us, but if they do not, we are putting ourselves in the position that we can still maintain those vital services for our vulnerable people ourselves in whatever model is the best way to provide it. In addition to this, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to just briefly mention regeneration. We are actively taking the lead in this, and we're encouraging our partners to help us scope ideas for renewal and regeneration of our estates in order to improve the environment for our residents. As far as the top of town is going on, everyone will know there are ongoing environmental improvements which can be seen at the moment, which we are hoping will make a great difference to the area. Planters have gone in, trees are going in. We're looking at tidying up the alleyways to the car parks, installing new signage and lighting, etc. That's all in addition, Mr. Mayor, to the other work that's going on in the top of town, where we have an ongoing events programme to animate and enliven the area and increase footfall. The Shopfront Grant Scheme, which was hugely successful last year and will begin again this year. We have appointed a new market coordinator to help with the market delivery. And we are currently engaging with businesses and the community to scope a business improvement district, which is being received very positively at the moment by businesses. So, Mr. Mayor, this budget provides a firm footing for activities that we have committed to undertake, but it also provides additional funding to ensure that our vision for Basingstoke as a regional destination is carried out and that the quality of life of our residents is maintained and improved. I support this budget. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Cousins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to refer ourselves back to something Councillor Bierman said earlier. He said that the green agenda isn't sexy. I think it depends on who's speaking about it. And that, funnily enough, is where I want to focus my contribution to tonight's budget, specifically on domestic refuse and recycling collection. We have a new policy now. It's 3 strikes and you're out. Now, whilst I feel that bullies residents, what does it actually do to the budget? You can see for yourselves. Refuse collection budget up, fly tipping budget up, recycling budget down. That kind of proves the point that the administration doesn't take recycling seriously. And if you want further proof, Appendix 5 of the budget shows that it was £113,000 underspend in recycling and refuse collection budget. And I don't think that we have properly looked at how we can use that underspend to work that back into the recycling budget. It's something that we should do, and this budget doesn't. I also agree with the letter that was sent to the Gazette recently. Let me quote it. It says, "Let me repeat a suggestion I have made in your pages previously. How about collecting food waste? Of the many options available, this is likely to be much more popular than many and deserves serious consideration." It was made by a Mr. Martin Bierman, who's Chinham Ward Councillor, and funnily enough, I agree with this resident, and I have been calling for it for quite a while. It's also what the residents in a poll of the Basingstoke Gazette Online agree with. They would like to see food waste collection. Now, again, this budget doesn't give us an avenue or an opportunity, in my opinion, to seriously consider this. And I've done my research, and I've pulled together, or rather I have found, the House of Commons Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Committee report on waste management in England. It was produced in October this year, and there's some quite stark comments in there which I would like to say. So in paragraph 33, it says, "In general terms, higher recycling rates require the expansion of existing services and the introduction of new ones. For example, separate food waste collections." I couldn't agree with them more. Again, in paragraph 71, and this takes the avenue of food waste collection further, it says that we must find ways of diverting more food waste out of the residual waste stream by methods which are environmentally viable and suitable to local circumstances. Where food waste is separately collected, it should be treated at local AD, anaerobic digestion plants, wherever possible. Now, funnily enough, Mr Mayor, we have an AD unit in our borough. It's in Dummer. Do we use it? No. Why aren't we using it? If we did use it, we would support a local business. Surely the council helping and aiding a local business is something that we encourage. It's something that we should be positively doing. It would also improve our local economy. Mr Mayor, I believe that this budget proves that the administration are not enthusiastic about bettering our recycle rate, and it's for this reason mainly, but a whole host of others, that I will not be supporting this budget. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Baker. Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I thought that I'd like to share with you, Mr Mayor and everyone else, an email I received only this afternoon, which I have to describe as being a rant from a resident of my ward who's a regular commuter from Overton Station to Basingstoke. And he says, parking is a joke. The parish is powerless and the borough and the county haven't properly resolved the land ownership issue over the station car park since the first phase of Overton Hill development of 99 houses. And now we've lost the appeal and the second phase of 120 houses is going to come along. The access roads, he goes on, are death traps with potholes and broken and disintegrating edges as a result of random parking. And there's no footway, and there's no street lights. The trains at peak are full, not a little full, but nearly all the time full, except when they're full to overcrowding. OK, so you try and cycle, walk, or use the bus instead. The bus only goes to certain places and is half the speed of the train. Nowhere is really in walking distance. You can cycle some places, but the infrastructure isn't ideal. The borough is anti-cycling. Even in a car, you're faced with congestion in the village at rush hour and school run time, and to be honest, the rural roads aren't great either. Now, the sad thing about his rant this afternoon is I think every word there is true. I contemplated the idea of asking for an amendment to the budget to set up a local plan community compensation fund, you know, 25 million or so, to compensate communities who have totally inappropriate development foisted on them. But no, nothing will compensate for an inappropriate development forced on it by a planning inspector or a development control committee who are frightened by an award of costs. We've been grossly let down by this administration's handling of the local plan. And I see nothing in the budget that are going to answer any of the other concerns that my local resident has raised with me this afternoon, and I therefore shall not be supporting the budget.
Thank you. Councillor Raffel.
Mr Mayor, the leader is absolutely right to say that our vision for the future is not just talk, it is already being delivered. He's absolutely right to say that the key planks of achieving that vision are economic growth and housing. That is why the delivery of our local plan is so important. Whilst the journey of that plan has been long and, for some before me, tortuous, we are now in sight of our destination. Indeed, we're almost on the driveway of our destination with a parking space waiting for us. Whilst tonight is not the night to commend the detail of our local plan to you, it is being delivered by all of us for the benefit of the whole of the borough. It fits in with our economic vision for the borough and is full of aspiration for our borough's future. It has been forged in a time of recession, Mr. Mayor, and recognises that economies can expand and contract, but the needs of our existing residents to have homes for their sons and daughters, combined with a longer living population, that need remains in good times and in bad. Some of our opponents may prefer to pour scorn on our efforts. I would prefer not to retaliate or pour scorn on their past criticisms. It is the job of opposition to hold government to account, to test and put counter-arguments, and I have sought to listen and work with the opposition in the formulation of the local plan. Each of us may pray for a majority, but in reality, our multi-party system, when it works, produces better results, especially in relation to planning policy, where it is more representative of the views of all of the people we represent and more robust when challenged from outside. Hence, it's my view that, Mr. Mayor, that our local plan has been shown so far to be robust because of the cooperation and input from councillors from different parties. However, for that local plan to be successfully delivered, we need to have a sound economic vision, which this budget is part of. Like the leader, I believe that our borough has tremendous potential, and that potential is now being recognised by central government and by big businesses because of our stewardship of this borough since 2006. Sadly, I say this with a slight smile, the electorate do not reward politicians who are modest. So let's spell it out. The Conservative-run borough is a success and is on track to becoming more successful in the future. That is good news for all of us here as politicians. We are all now in a better position than in the past to help the disadvantaged find a home and help the disadvantaged get off benefits and find employment. We're in a better position now to attract businesses and employment opportunities to our borough. Our borough is a great place to live, and it has a great future if the electorate allow us to continue delivering on our vision. This budget, Mr. Mayor, supports those with aspiration and hope. This budget supports those with determination to improve not only their lives, but the lives of others in this borough. That includes us. And this budget is a budget built from success for future success, and I urge all members to support it.
Thank you. Councillor Bean.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Basingstoke is my home. I wanted to be elected to be sure our town has a secure future and provides our residents with great services whilst continuing to keep council tax low. Since I was elected in 2011, this administration has frozen council tax, helped to create thousands more jobs and embarked on a number of projects to improve facilities such as the top of the town and more recently the leisure park, all against a backdrop of national economic recovery. We continue to operate on a sound and resilient financial base despite the irresponsibility of a local opposition who proposed to allocate £32 million of taxpayers' money at the 11th hour and a national economic crisis we inherited from the previous Labour government. Mr. Mayor, this budget once again provides a freeze in council tax. It will be for a sixth year that our residents have not seen any increase in their council tax bill. As a result, Basingstoke and Deane has the sixth lowest council tax in the country and the ninth highest spend per head. This means that under our Conservative leadership, our residents have lower taxes, better facilities and more money in their pocket. 71% of residents believe we deliver value for money. Across the borough, there are 7,000 more people in work than there were when I was elected. Unemployment has fallen to its lowest level in 14 years, and over 1,000 businesses were set up last year alone. We can also see the benefits at a local level. Since I have been elected in Hatchwarren and Beggarwood, the number of people claiming job seekers allowance has fallen by over 65%, But it's not just my ward that's benefited. Across the town, in Norden, where I was a candidate previously, the number of people claiming job seekers allowance has fallen by over 61%, proof that this Conservative administration is of benefit to the whole town. Indeed, the overall claimant count in November 2014 was 23% lower than it was in 2006 when Labour left office. Of course, these are just statistics, but behind each and every number is a hard-working person in our town with the security of a job, the ability to provide for themselves and their families, self-confidence and belief that goes with earning a wage. Mr Mayor, as a mother to young children, I've been working together with a portfolio holder for youth services. I'm particularly pleased to see that this budget includes a 23% increase on money spent for the youth strategy. This will enable us to build on the fantastic work that has been undertaken over the past 3 years, where we have seen the number of youth clubs increase from 3 to 25. Greater investment for new youth buildings in Hatchwarren, Winklebury, Southam, Bramley and Tadley, and our summer programme streets receive an accolade from the Home Office. The new youth strategy has listened to young people through the Your Big Say survey, and we will aim to increase the provision and awareness of positive activities for young people to ensure that everyone can enjoy the services on offer. We will also work creatively with partners to help and support young people and develop alternative ways in which we can deliver our services. We have a strong and vibrant youth scene in Basingstoke, but we can always do more. The leisure park is one such project. We are at a stage now where it's advance or decline, do or die. I know that this administration is committed to taking the unique opportunity forward to provide a fantastic leisure park that will have something for everyone, whilst really putting Basingstoke on the map as a regional destination of choice. This will undoubtedly have a real positive impact on the local economy. It is down to careful financial planning and best use of taxpayers' money that we are able to take these kind of projects forward for the benefit of our residents. And I know that one day my children will value these services that we are protecting. Mr Mayor, I am confident that this budget will deliver for my residents, the hard-working people of Hatchwarren and Beggarwood, and I support it. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think the issue here is that there are two very different visions in this council chamber in terms of the future of our borough and of our town and the rural areas, and I think it's right to say that there needs to be a very real human element to this particular budget. Fascinating comment about the £2 million. Fascinated to know how it's going to be spread around, because we've got an economic development and council priorities reserve that's a one-off budget that's now going to cover housing and homelessness, welfare and legislative changes, transport, climate change, youth initiatives and economic development. Which is going to drop off the end? Who gets to spend the money first? How do you divvy it up? How do you meet all your priorities in that one singular budget of £2 million of one-off money? You need to do a lot better than that if you're going to tackle the welfare issues in this town and the impact of supporting people. Because it's going to be an ongoing commitment this council's going to have to make to those people who no longer have a home, thanks to the county council and what they're doing in creating homelessness in this town. Question really begs, really, who are you running this council for? Who are you really running this council for? And I think a lot of the speeches on the other side give that away. We have a very different vision. Doesn't mean we're right and you're wrong. It means we have different views and different priorities. That's clear in what you said. It's clear in what we've said. What we're saying is that we want to tackle the housing agenda in this borough. We want to tackle the issues of public transport. Yes, we do want to tackle the green agenda because we do see it, like you do, as being important. But it takes vision, it takes being bold, and it takes doing a lot more than is in this budget. It begs the questions about the investments and the way that the money of this council is actually being handled. We are great at lending other councils our money for them to go and build council houses and affordable housing and invest in their services. We've cut services year on year. That's a fact. Your outsourcing and your commissioning is costing this council significant money when it should be investing that money in delivering high quality public services. And I just hate this debate about public good and private bad that we've had in committee after committee over the commissioning. Because the actual truth of the matter is that the public sector in Basingstoke in many ways, is married to the private sector. And you need a healthy private and public sector living and working off of each other if you are truly going to have economic success. And just saying profit is this and you're bad and you don't understand business is rubbish. Of course we get business, and of course we understand how we need to invest this council's money safely, appropriately, to create a return. That's just childish politics. What we're debating here is how you should do that. We believe that building homes to create a rate of return is the right thing to do. We believe investing in small businesses to create a return is the right thing to do. We believe investing in apprenticeships and so on is the right thing to do. Those are things that give a social good, as well as give a return to this authority in how you go about doing your council business. That isn't a bad thing, it isn't a bad word. Building council houses isn't a bad word. Having rows of them, it's just silly language. You pepper pot, you create a community, you create a living, breathing place where people want to live with the infrastructure that goes with it. That's just stupid politics. What we're actually talking about on Many Down and on these other developments is genuinely the opportunity to do something special. Because if we don't grasp that opportunity, it will go. You build it and it will go. And we will wind up with the same problems we've had on many of our existing estates, where we would have wished to have designed things differently.
1 minute.
Well, guess what? Many Down is publicly owned. We can do things differently if we choose to, and still make a return to this authority and the taxpayers and those council housing tenants for which the land was bought, the money from them that was used to buy the land. And finally, Mr. Mayor, in terms of this budget, it's this sense, and particularly the point that was made about leisure, but the point that was made about young people, and just in response to my colleagues here on the left here, under 18s are no longer allowed to claim anything. It's all well and good you're talking about under 18s and all the other young people now, because of what the government have done, can't claim a thing. Now, I talked to the kids at Queen Mary's College, the young people at Queen Mary's College. I genuinely heard them in terms of their complaints and grievances about the impact on their lives of what the coalition government have done. Now, I'm not going to blame anybody and say anything. All I'm saying is the impact on their lives and the stories they've told me are genuine, and that's something we should care about. So in response to the budget, Mr. Mayor, I will vote against the budget because I just don't believe it delivers for the people of our borough.
Councillor Wadena.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As Deputy Leader of the Council, I'm pleased to rise in support of this budget. Further, given my responsibility for community safety, I am particularly proud of what this administration has achieved to date and what it seeks to achieve in future. That is reflected in the budget in front of members tonight. Our community safety patrol officers have worked with the police to cut crime across the borough by 13% last year. The hard work they've put in means that 98% of our residents feel safe during the day and 87% feel safe at night. That's a good start, but there's still further to go. And what's indisputable is that this is a stark contrast from when we took over control of this council, when these figures stood 8% lower during the day and an awful 31% lower at night. We have made progress. And we should remember that these officers are the people that we, as this administration, have championed, while long-standing members of this council will remember that there were some opposite who were passionately against introducing them. Our residents told us that the level of crime and antisocial behaviour is in the top 3 most important factors in making somewhere a good place to live. Conservatives listened, Conservatives acted. Mr. Mayor, this budget contains an additional £84,000 worth of funding for our own patrolling officers. We have increased the size of the team and are looking at what additional powers can be given to them to ensure that our residents get the best possible service from these officers. So when Labour say we're cutting services, no. We've saved taxpayers' money, we've protected services, and we're doing what residents tell us they want. I am particularly pleased that our new management of the service will ensure that officers are assigned for the whole of the borough, not just the town, whilst also increasing flexibility to direct officers to hotspots, such as the town centre, when events are held. Having met with the team on day one of the new service, I've seen firsthand the experience and drive that these officers have to make our part of North Hampshire a safer place. I am confident that we have taken the right decision to protect the public. On this side of the chamber, we're aware that we can only fund these services as a result of clear, long-term economic and financial planning. The Conservatives have that long-term plan for Basingstoke and Deane. Year after year, we've put forward balanced budgets at the same time as freezing council tax. This will be the 6th year in a row that we've frozen residents' council tax, which does show you you can have lower bills and better services. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Faulkner. Councillor Faulkner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Taking a slightly different tack on the budget, I will support the budget as it stands, but I'd like to put it into context as I see it. At the end of the previous government, Labour's former Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Liam Byrne, left a note for his successor, the excellent Liberal David Laws, which said, "There's no money left. There's no money left." Worse to come is that there is a legacy of debt and financial commitment which will burden the younger generation for decades. And in my particular case, Gordon Brown trashed the private pension funds and the industry virtually collapsed with it. Thus, the last 5 years have been tough for people, tough for business, and tough for public authorities. Against that background, Basingstoke and Deane's performance has been extremely good. Its record on council tax is remarkable. 7.6 million of savings have been made without cuts to frontline services. Inward investment and job creation is the envy of other regions. In front of us this evening, we have a well-crafted, robust and realistic budget, and I congratulate the officers and the Cabinet for the work that they've put in. At a detail level, one might be tempted to debate specific issues. For example, bulk waste collection, yes, is £25, but it covers up to 5 items, so that would be a sofa, 2 chairs, and throw in a couple of redundant borough councillors at it. Or if you take the entrepreneurial view, you could sell the spare capacity to your neighbours and make a profit. There are many imponderables, intangibles, and assumptions have to be made in producing the budget. And of course, in 3 months' time, we may well have a very different situation. But meanwhile, this budget should serve our borough well, and I will vote in favour.
Thank you. Councillor Potter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I just say, taking up the point that Councillor Faulkner just raised, let it be put on record that many people in this country with wealth have gained enormously over the last 5 years during the period of recession. It's the poorest in society who've suffered and paid for others. That's the reality of it. I want to deal, Mr. Mayor, if I can, there's lots of things in terms of the general thrust of the budget that I disagree with, but I want to deal with one area in detail, if I may. Specifically, this is a matter that relates to Appendix 8 and page 8 of 9 on Appendix 8. This relates to the local infrastructure fund allocations, and even more specifically, the allocation of ring-fence funding of £500,000 for the deputy leaders and my favourite project, the Bramley footbridge over the railway line. This ring fencing of £500,000 is wrong and disadvantages the good people of Bramley, who have consistently, through their parish council, sought to argue other priorities. It should be reallocated. Let me explain why. In the original LIP application written by the deputy leader, it confirms that Network Rail would provide match funding for the project, and the October Cabinet report refers to up to 50% of total costs coming from Network Rail. As a minimum, this project would cost at least £1 million, we're told, and considerably more if it was made accessible for people with disabilities and other mobility issues, which it absolutely should do if it was ever to be done. This LIF application was deliberately misleading. I have a statement from the relevant Network Rail Director dated the 22nd of February in which it is said the installation of the footbridge does not reduce safety risks sufficiently for it to meet the criteria for Network Rail to fund a footbridge. My words, but Network Rail is not committed to joint funding. Just to add to this appalling misuse of council allocated funds, we had the spectacle of the Deputy Leader attending a Development Control Committee declaring a direct pecuniary interest in the proposed housing development at Minchin's Lane to argue against, and I stress against, the housing scheme in Bramley under which he has negotiated the allocation of Section 106 monies with the County Council towards the footbridge project. Some of you may think this is very clever on his behalf, I'm sure he does. I call it something else, but it's the sort of behaviour that brings politicians into disrepute. All of this is nothing more than local political propaganda for the Tories, using council resources to benefit the Deputy Leader and his chosen successor, Mr Robinson. I don't know why that name rings a bell, but it does. Having said this, Councillor Jay Wardner has all the attributes to make a successful Tory MP. His only disappointment, maybe, as he joins the other Tory MPs on the opposition benches, is that Malcolm Rifkin won't be there to join him.
Yep. Okay. Firstly, Mr Mayor, I'd like to commend the officers and staff of Basingstoke-on-Deane for delivering better frontline services whilst maintaining strong cost reductions in previous year's budget, which has allowed us each year for the last 5 years to maintain a balanced budget with no diminution in frontline services. And it's been said before this evening, and it's worth repeating again, we are in an enviable position. We have the 6th lowest council tax, and we have the 9th highest spend per head. And we have one of the highest satisfaction ratings, which is currently 21% higher than it was under the previous Labour administration. So what does this strong Conservative-led fiscal management mean when it's translated to our residents' lives? It means there are new business growth in the borough. There are hundreds of new small companies which are the bedrock of economic success within this borough, and there is a plan to develop a strong electronic communications and future which is way beyond our dreams if successful. To get that sort of investment from companies outside is a godsend to any council and to any environment. So we should be really pleased with how our strong fiscal management has delivered this business growth. It's also delivered lower unemployment because of business growth. One of the issues that all our councils need to be dealing with is how to help provide a structure which increases employment, increases wealth, and gives us more resources, because that's what creates the finance that we're able to spend on projects that we want. It has to come from the private sector economy. That's what creates the future. It's also allowed us to have strong inward investment. Now, we've heard before, the names, Waitrose, John Lewis, Network Rail. These are big and major and flagship employers. They employ big numbers. They don't choose lightly where to put something. They choose because they believe in a community. They believe in the stability of a community, and they believe in its future. So Basingstoke, in the last 5 years, has become attractive to investors, whether they're private, whether they're government, or whether they're development authorities. And the core of that is because of our balanced budget approach with stable, low local taxation and a strong ethic of cost management. We are a reliable partner to do business with. And through this, we are creating the wealth that this borough, so we can afford to start building a future which we'd all like to deliver for our residents.
But on a more local level, what does that mean to my ward? Well, it means we can invest in leisure. We have been able to create a budget which has allowed us to refurbish the Tadley swimming pool. That budget has come from Basingstoke-on-Dean. We're supporting youth. We have been able to put budget towards developing the youth centre for the young people of Tadley. We're developing better public transport. There is increased services from Tadley down to Basingstoke. There are late night services. There are discounts for students in holiday period of time. So actually it's a different picture than one that keeps being presented. It's one of purposeful growth and progress. We see improving public safety through more CSOs. And finally, we see improving road links between Tadley and Basingstoke. Though that comes through investment from the outside. So whilst it's very easy to be critical, there are many, many good things that are happening within our wards. And sometimes I think we take too much of this for granted. Recently I've been to a couple of other parts of the country and talked to people, and they visited me. And they look at us with envy about the quality of services, the quality of life that we're building for our residents, and the quality of backup. So all these stories are possible for one thing, because we have confident budget planning. And in 2015, I see us continuing this. What will our budget give? It will help our residents by keeping down their local taxation for another year. That is what comes over on the doorstep to me. It continues to develop better value for our residents and challenges officers and executives to continue to develop innovative and imaginative solutions. And finally, it acknowledges the need to continue to develop reserve funding to support future solutions and investment in more difficult years to come. I commend this budget, Mr. Mayor, and I hope this will be passed easily tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to try and respond to a number of things that have been said. There seems to be a view that people on this side of the chamber don't think Basingstoke's a good place to live in, don't think it's been successful. And I don't think that's right. I don't think that we think that at all. I think we enjoy living here. I mean, I proclaim Basingstoke as the cultural centre of the Central South. Beautiful Basingstoke, and I mean it. And I'm happy to represent Basingstoke. But I think what's missing is a lack of understanding that we have got people in desperate need. And I am sure it'll be a wonderful new leisure park, but the residents, certainly in my ward, are unlikely to be able to afford to use it. We talk about freezing council tax. Yes, we do freeze council tax. I expect any administration would have frozen the council tax, because the council tax only provides for around about 20% of our expenditure. So freezing the council tax doesn't make a huge amount of difference to the amount of money that's available to spend in this town. We keep building reserves. I haven't got a problem with reserves, as in a football analogy. Occasionally, though, they've got to come off the bench, and they've got to be spent. And all the time, we're talking about this town being successful, people looking at it and coveting what we have in this town, and yet we're not prepared to spend some of the money, and we have a lot of it. We're not prepared to spend that money on people that genuinely need it. The level of crime has reduced by 35%, night crime. That wasn't anything that we did. That was the closure of Liquid that did that. And the police will confirm that if you want to ask them. Also, this whole debate could have been avoided if you'd have accepted the amendment, which wasn't earth-shattering. But if you'd have accepted the amendment, this debate would have been over by now, and we would have all gone home, because we'd have all been able to vote together. We generate income in all sorts of places, which is good for Basingstoke. What we're not doing, and that's what's missing from this budget, is we're not looking at the people in the area, principally, I have to say, in the town, who cannot look after themselves. We're not looking to support them. If we were, we wouldn't have the high levels of social deprivation that we do have. People in some of those areas don't even come out of their area. They have no idea what Festival Place looks like. Come and have a look at them. Come and talk to them. They're scared. They don't understand. They don't understand half the stuff that goes on in here. Many of them do, and many of them come to me and say, what are you going to do for us? What are you going to do about the state of the roads? What are you going to do when the sewage comes up through the drains? What are you going to do when the hedges are full of rubbish? We get those sort of queries all the time. And to be fair, officers are brilliant. You know, when we let the officers know and when we let Sovereign know, stuff gets done. But it doesn't alter the fact that the people that we represent, some of us on this side of the chamber represent, genuinely need you to look at their quality of life. And I'm sorry, but this budget doesn't do that. And I really would rather have much rather have stood up and said, actually, I think this is a good budget, and I'd love to vote for it. But I can't, because it does very little for the people that I represent. And I am sorry to have to say that.
Councillor Ottleton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to reiterate what our leader has said, that Basingstoke is a great place to live. And through our sound budget, we've achieved much in this borough, and there's certainly more to come. And this is especially for the residents, both in the urban and rural area. We've heard Councillor Bean say we have adopted a new youth strategy using your big say, and I'm sure you'll all be interested to see later on in the year how the action plan plans out. It's sad to say, but dementia is on the rise in Basingstoke, and it's not only for the elderly. We have got people in their 40s and 50s. Again, we have been proactive. BDBC is to become a dementia-friendly organisation, and plans are in place, and we are talking to the MALs and to Festival Place. Their staff are undertaking the training, and I hope soon that the councillors here and the staff in the borough will also become dementia friendly. We've also opened a Friday daycare unit at Viables, so we are looking after our people when it comes to dementia. Troubled families. Overall progress in the first 3 years has been encouraging, and we have been rewarded with this for positive outcomes and with a further 200k. Refreshed and monitored processes for the Council's contracted leisure facilities. And of course, all these that I'm talking about does have an effect on people's quality of life. We have a high standard of customers coming in to our leisure centres, approximately 1.2 million last year. In health and wellbeing, we have an extremely good panel. We have just been in receipt of 141,000 for projects, and in these projects we are looking at potential projects in the borough, looking at families, mental health. Mental health is the poor relation, so we're doing a lot now on mental health, obesity. Working with the CCGs, they are very aware of what is happening in surgeries, etc., and with people being housebound and not being able to get out. We are looking at that, and patients' participation are doing a lot for us with this. We've got extensive engagement with communities on sports provision and club development. 590 public responses to consultation on Down Grange. Coordinated a wide range of health initiatives. We've got 7 new health walks, very important for the people. We've had emotional first aid, 48 people trained to support young people and promoting healthy environments. 38 businesses have signed up to breastfeeding and welcoming within their business, extremely important again for mothers. Dementia disabled, we've also doing a lot more with that with Hampshire County Council. Managing participatory budgeting schemes, have your say in your community choice. Buckskin and Southam have been recipients of part of a 48k engaged with 680 residents in the voting process, and that is about to start again in March. We've coordinated a number of events, including a national play day. Excellent feedback on that. Think Safe, Year 6 pupils are seen every year at Bramley grounds, and this has proved to be extremely successful with about 6,500 to date participants, and those are children, as I said, in 6. Down Grange car park extension completed. Moving forward with the revised parking in residential areas, and we are consulting with local members and residents on the top of priority roads. And it has been said by councillors over the other side that we don't listen, we do listen to the residents. And going back to the surgeries and transport, etc., I'm very pleased to say that I go out sometimes, but also the transport staff here in the borough. They are now going out and talking to the people and listening and coming back to see what their issues with transport. Now going on to transport, we've got a stronger partnership working in quarterly meetings with Stagecoach, Hampshire County Council.
1 minute.
And this has led to improvements. Going on to cycling, which I think was something that one of the councillors brought up. We are about to start negotiations with Network Rail, Stagecoach and the cycling department, and the Disability Forum will be involved as well, and community transport, looking at how we can get joined up thinking on transport. I was very pleased to say that I was in a meeting last week or the week before looking at cycling. I agree with Councillor, and he's not here unfortunately, but we did look at the way they'd put the cycling furniture in. Not brilliant, but Hampshire County Council, our team from planning, are now looking at a cycling strategy, so there's a lot going to go on in future, and we have an excellent member of the general public on this group looking at it. And
you bring it to a conclusion, please.
Finished, okay. And we are being very successful with our nighttime service and also with our Sapphire, Bombay Sapphire out in the area. Thank you.
Councillor Keating.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I didn't prepare a speech for this meeting because I was ill earlier in the week. But having sat through the speeches from the cabinet people, I decided it was nice to hear the good things that we're doing. But it's not all down to you lot. It's down to us collectively. But the self-congratulatory tone was disturbing. Let me just give you some real evidence of fact. On Manidown, when the Tories took control of this council in 2006, the first thing they did was say, we will no longer promote it for building. In 2009, they said, not only will we not promote it, we won't build on it. Then we were now coming towards the date by which a local plan should have been submitted. They couldn't submit a local plan because they couldn't get their act together. You lot. What happened then was, if you won't build on Manidown in 2009, you have to begin to plan to build elsewhere. And that's what happened. The Tories planned to build elsewhere because they wouldn't build on Manidown. Got to the point where 2011 came and went, no local plan, and big hassle in the Tory party because some Tories wanted to build on Manidown because that would stop them building elsewhere. We then got to 2012. The High Court decided you got it all wrong. Now, we had a director of planning who was quite capable, but on this occasion was not able to advise, you can't go down the road you're going down, so the High Court had to stop you. Then, in 2012 and 13, you spent all your time trying to get the lowest possible numbers for build. So you submitted a constructive part of the local plan to say, build 780 houses. Now, I might have got the numbers slightly wrong, but the point was small numbers. The local plan inspector comes along in 2014, and with one comment, nothing more than that, one comment, all of a sudden, we can't build to 780, we have to build 850. One comment. You wouldn't listen to us at the time, by the way. You wouldn't listen to us. We said 780. Excuse me, you wouldn't listen to us. We said 780 was not enough. Then we've now got, right, here we are now, 2015, no local plan. Because we have no local plan, we're planning or building by appeal. That means we, the council, will always lose the appeals. The Developers will build where they want and what they want, and we'll pick up the tab for both sides. Now, patting yourself on the back about how great you're doing doesn't sound so great now, does it? And our emerging local plan, which is going to be brilliant, will probably be in place 6 years late in 2017. Now, in all honesty,
1 minute.
I believe Basingstoke is a great place to live. We have £400 million in reserves. I don't mean just capital, but capital and money. And we have loads of reserves. And we try to say to you, well, spend 25 million on the good things of life for the people in desperate need. And you decide not to. Why? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. All good things must come to an end. Our last speaker is Councillor Isaac.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Councillor Sanders. Basingstoke and Dean is in good shape, and these budget proposals prove it. This Conservative administration has stuck to its sound, firm and compassionate policies during the years of adversity, and the fruits for our residents are now being seen in better services and major new investment in housing, transport infrastructure and regeneration projects across the town centre, Basingview and the leisure park. Basingstoke is on the up and means business once again. And this borough has been making the most of the government's sound economic policies. As we've heard, new jobs are being created, and this does make a difference to people's lives. The number of job seekers borough-wide is now down to 884 compared to 2,204 in 2010, a 60% reduction. Residents, I believe, know that our future will be built around a partnership between the public and private sectors, and the massive investment and expertise we are now deploying and will need in the years ahead to deliver new homes at Manydown will require us to foster strong, mutually trusting relationships with the private sector as well as public sector partners. Yet the Labour group deliberately manufactures differences that don't really exist about affordable housing at Manydown for no benefit other than some peculiar tribal point scoring. We support 40% affordable housing at Manydown once it's been demonstrated that it's viable in accordance with our own draft local plan. We want to get on with it. And yes, we want to do it differently. And until recently, you were with us. But that's all stopped. These proposals are for a balanced, debt-free budget, with no increase in council tax payable by residents for a 6th year in succession. This is being achieved in the face of reducing government grant funding, down £960,000 in 15-16, and pay and cost inflation of £1 million. Once again, we are finding savings of just short of £1 million and increasing our revenues by some £900,000 in order to balance the books. Further savings and extra revenue will have to be found in future years. These budget proposals warn of potential deficits in the 3 financial years ahead and council tax increases of 2%. But these are forecasts only, and in the meantime we'll be working hard to find ways to overcome these shortfalls while maintaining good services. If keeping a tight grip on our finances is one pillar of this budget, the other pillar is actively spending our resources, contrary to what has been said opposite, both revenue and capital, in a sustainable and properly directed way. In this budget, we're planning to nearly double the 15-16 capital programme to £10 million with £5.7 million of new allocations. These cover top-of-the-town business start-up and shopfront grants, CCT security upgrades, future cemetery provision, and £1.6 million towards the road network, including improvements to the Thornycroft and Winchester Road roundabouts. £900,000 is already available, as announced by Councillor Reachus, in grants for residents and community groups to make energy improvements and savings. Through the Local Infrastructure Fund, over £1 million has been allocated, including a new youth wing at Tadley Community Centre and upgrades and extensions to community halls in Popley and Sherfield. £665,000 is being released and matched pound by our partners, Hampshire County Council, so that we can get on with securing a planning permission at Manydown and bring forward the day that new affordable homes are delivered there.
1 minute.
Rather than wasting time arguing about absolute commitments to percentages of affordable housing. It's worth noting that after 3 years, during which time this borough's number of new affordable homes fell below the 300 per annum target, officers are now forecasting 457 will be delivered in this financial year and 462 in the next. In conclusion, I commend this budget to Council. By holding down council tax another year while sustaining excellent services, I believe it is good for the residents of Basingstoke and Deane. By encouraging investment by companies, large, small and start-up, it is business friendly. And by investing in infrastructure improvements and new homes and winning increasing recognition in government that we are good partners for growth, it is good for the future of this borough.
Mr Mayor, can I move standing orders to complete the agenda? Agreed. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sanders, could you sum up, please?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I started with the words of the Gazette, and so I'm going to almost finish with them. Basingstoke and Deane is in good shape, exciting times are on the horizon, and there is no doubt that our place to be proud of is really going places. Over the past couple of years, we've seen a vision evolving for the future of the borough. A vision of prosperity and improving quality of life for all sectors of our community, based upon sound economic growth and well-planned housing development. A vision that will make the borough a centre of excellence for the latest technologies, with a standard of local facilities way above what would normally be expected. It is an ambitious vision. It's a challenging vision. It's a vision that will not be made reality without the courage to grasp new opportunities. But it is an achievable vision if we maintain the courage and determination to succeed. And most importantly, that we demonstrate that courage and commitment, and vitally the competence as a council that will encourage the inward investment that we will need, whether from government or the private sector. As we have seen, that investment is starting to flow, and this budget continues the theme of sound and realistic financial management that has been established in recent years, that will be the bedrock of our success in the future. Mr Mayor, before I finish, there's one other matter, whilst not included in the budget papers, may well have a financial impact. As everyone will be aware, the hospital is planning to build a new critical care unit close to Junction 7 of the M3, with alongside it a cancer care unit. Funding for the cancer care unit is largely being raised through public subscription to the ARC Cancer Charity Appeal. There can hardly be a family in Basingstoke and Deane which has not been touched in some way by the effects of suffering from cancer, or maybe, unfortunately, in the future. It is one of the most prevalent of all afflictions in our borough. Therefore, ensuring that we have the very best cancer support facilities locally seems to me to be absolutely the right type of initiative that we as a council should be supporting. It is therefore my intention, without prejudging the outcome of any planning application, that as and when planning approval is granted for the unit, Council should allocate a substantial grant to the ARC appeal from the infrastructure reserve. This will require a separate Council decision, but it is something I hope can be supported across the Chamber. Mr Mayor, this is a sound and a practical budget that continues to lay the foundations for the future success of the borough, and I commend it to Council.
Thank you very much for the debate. It was well argued from both sides. However, when we have spoken at length about all the positive things that have been done to stimulate the economy, you forgot to mention the spending power of the Mayoress, which has done wonders for the local economy. This is required to be a recorded vote, so we will now move to the vote. On paper 9B. The vote is open. Are we there? Not yet. We're there, aren't we? The vote is closed. The vote is carried. We will now move to 9B2, the Treasury Management Strategy 2015-16, report of the Head of Resources, paper C. Councillor Isaac, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is the Treasury Management Strategy. This report sets out the proposed Treasury Management Policy and Strategy for 15-16. It outlines the strategy for achieving the income we need as a council to deliver our objectives. The main policy objectives are to invest prudently, having regard to security and liquidity. You can imagine who might have written that, and achieve optimum returns consistent with these objectives. Key points of this report are the rebalancing of our investment portfolio by investing in externally managed funds with the aim of securing higher returns and allocating credit risk to these managers. Also, responding to the Financial Services Banking Reform Act, which is now in force, and this increases risks to deposit and loan holders in the event of a bank or a building society getting into difficulty. We are taking measures to reduce our direct exposure to banks and building societies accordingly. Finally, there is the addition of the Council's approach to ethical investing. I move the report.
Is the report agreed? I must ask for it to be seconded. Is it agreed? Sorry, Councillor Harvey?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I rise to speak on this if I can before you get to the moving on quickly bit. Just
You
hearing
have
what
time
the-
to speak.
Yeah, indeed. Just hearing the leader and what the leader has announced. Aware of the conversations taking place, I think, in terms of the cancer care unit, it is good and important, and I welcome it. I'm sure other colleagues do as well. It raises an important point, I think, about how this investment portfolio and this council's resources can be used to the benefit of the borough. And I welcome that. I welcome the commitment that might be given in regard to the cancer care unit. But I also raise the question about the broader issue of the hospital itself and the broader issue of all that that represents to the town, and where opportunities might be, not just with the hospital, but there's plenty of other examples that we could point to, and the Southam surgery is another example, of those sorts of initiatives where our money invested in that way for the benefit of the residents of Basingstoke and Dean can make a huge difference, and a return, yes, in some respects, in some of those cases, but nonetheless the social good that we were talking of earlier. So in rising to support what the leader has said, interested in the detail of you bringing it forward, aware of a number of the conversations that have taken place in this regard, it raises that broader question, Mr. Mayor, of what we may do with our own resources and investment to achieve such good, perhaps across the whole of the hospital and the cancer care unit, but not just that, other investments in other parts of our community along similar lines.
Thank you. That said, are you agreed? Well done. Item 10, notices of motion. I'm not sure whether to say thank you for not actually tabling any tonight, or saying where's your lack of imagination? Because after last time. Item 11, to receive the minutes of the following meetings as listed, which includes the Manydown Executive of the 13th of February and Cabinet of the 17th of February. Are there any questions? Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Right down towards the bottom, audit and accounts. 2nd of February 2015. Page 5346. My question, Mr. Mayor, is to Councillor Marks in his capacity as Chair of Audit and Accounts. And I refer to para 4214, minutes of the meeting held on the 24th of November 2014. My question is, would Councillor Marks care to share with us what explanation was given to him by officers to persuade him to agree the delay of the appointment of a support officer to the Ethical Policy Panel until after June, extending the delay of this crucial work by 12 months? Is it really true that we are that short of appropriately qualified officers?
Councillor Marks.
Mr Mayor, as on the minutes, you'll see I weren't the chairman for that meeting, so I'll ask Councillor Tate to take this question.
That seems very sensible.
Thank you. The discussion I had with the officers indicated that currently that they, having had a meeting regarding the resources available, felt that they were not able, didn't feel comfortable that they had enough time within the current staffing to develop that solution properly. And as such, the offer was made that with a graduate trainee arriving shortly, which is in June, that that person would be an excellent choice to undertake that role as the lead officer. I agreed with that on the basis that it would give us the opportunity to have new thinking around this type of topic, which is a new topic which has been brought to the Treasury management. So from that point of view, I felt it was appropriate to accept the offer from my point of view and put it out to the rest of the committee.
Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I stand here this evening confused as to then really who is chair of this committee. That this should be directed to the vice chair really doesn't stand, I would say, scrutiny. The chair is the chair, and such a valuable committee as Audit and Accounts requires and should have a strong steer in the work of this committee. And I do then therefore wonder whether the current chair does actually know the business that is being conducted by his committee in such a manner as to have to pass this over to the vice chair. It's got nothing to do, Mr Mayor, with his being attending at the relevant meetings or not. And I will still then direct my supplementary to the vice chair. Is this really then staff shortages or a tactic to delay this topic being progressed?
From my point of view, it's the opportunity to progress the topic well, with new enthusiasm, with new blood, and it's not about a tactic to kick it off into the long grass at all.
Councillor Potter.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. With your permission, I've got a question, I think, of the leader. It relates to the Cabinet meeting of the 17th of February, and it relates to page 5360 and minute 58/14, declarations of interest. I want to ask the leader why he continues to think it appropriate to allocate the responsibility for the Leisure Park redevelopment project to a portfolio holder who clearly has to declare, I guess from here on in, his personal interest in the project, which I presume is associated with his direct connection with Montague Evans, who are charged with overseeing this project and selling it on to some outside agency. If the pattern is repeated that took place at this Cabinet meeting, the portfolio holder will have to absent himself from any discussions, will not be able to present his own report to Cabinet or anywhere else, and quite frankly, it seems to me there must be, I'm a bit hesitant about this, there must be other talented members of the Cabinet who could actually undertake this role with absolute integrity. That's my question, Mr Mayor.
Pass that over to the leader.
Well, Mr Mayor, I think Councillor Eisen made this very clear at the time that his interest was non-pecuniary. nevertheless declaring it very openly. I think this is very, very similar to a situation that I think Councillor Harvey had when we were discussing sites for the local plan, etc., and he was working at the time for a company which was actively engaged in promoting a site that was going through planning at the time, but he was not involved in that particular part of the business, so he disclosed a non-pecuniary interest and then continued to take part in all the debates. I think it's very clear. The advice from the monitoring officer, I seem to remember, was that Councillor Isaac should act in the way that he did, and he was perfectly in line with that. It is absolutely true that we do have some very talented other members of the Cabinet that could pick up this particular point, and no doubt when we get to May and when I'm reconsidering who will be members of the Cabinet at that time, I will look at this subject again.
Were there any other questions? Councillor Potter?
Supplementary. I mean, the point I'd seek to make, I think, is that Councillor Harvey is not a portfolio holder in regard to the matter that the leader refers to. Just as a matter of record, and I'm sure Councillor Isaac will correct this if I'm wrong, but he is listed on his own, by his own definition, on the members' register of interest as a partner in Montague Evans. It seems to me this is a significant difference, and quite frankly, it just seems to me, I've said this to him privately, we've had our discussions, this is inappropriate, and it seems to me it falls to the leader to do something about it.
Well, it might seem that to Councillor Potter. It doesn't seem so to me, it didn't seem so to the monitoring officer, and I am absolutely convinced that Councillor Isaac is acting in a proper and honourable way, and it is very valuable to have somebody with his experience in this particular area, which not many councillors do have, working on the behalf of the council.
Right. Were there any other questions? No. So we can approve the minutes. Agreed. And item 12, moving on to questions from members on notice. Councillor Watts.
Papers, Chairman. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Watts, for your question. I do, of course, join you in welcoming our new Democratic Services Manager. You asked how much was spent in 4 years on mentoring and contract assistance in electoral services since the post was made redundant. Since that time, the Council has spent £14,500 on consultancy support and a further £1,500 on an electoral registration audit. I would agree with you that savings are not the same as efficiency, but I would hope that anyone can see that £14,500 is considerably less than we would have spent on a full-time member of staff in that time.
Supplementary?
Well, my supplementary begins with astonishment because I asked the question in council at the end of 1 year and was told it was 21,000 in that 1 year. So we shall check that record. Would the Cabinet member agree to initiate a member-led review of all the staff cuts that have been made under so-called efficiency and savings and review the effect on efficiency, please?
No, Councillor Watts, I will not agree to that, and we've carried out some very detailed efficiency and savings reviews in this council, which have all been documented. I will check the figure for you, though, given that you seem to have a different one.
Councillor Bierman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As per the order paper, thank you.
Councillor Bierman, many and varied are my responsibilities as a portfolio holder, but unfortunately they don't extend to coach stops unless the leader has not told me something. Invite Councillor Ossleton to respond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Since January the 26th this year, the coach stop on Churchill Way has not been used by National Express. Their services have been diverted to the bus interchange at Alençon Link. This arrangement has proactively been put in place in advance of the demolition and subsequent rebuilding of Car Park 1 in Festival Place, when the coach stop will be closed for the duration of the works. The arrangement was agreed at a meeting in October last year with borough officers from Property Services, Transport and Licensing, representatives from Stagecoach, National Express and Milligan Retail, the owners of Festival Place. The benefits of the new location for National Express are that it has good passenger waiting facilities, new BDBC funded shelters, direct pedestrian access to the malls, shopping centre, the railway station and taxi rank. Passengers can access the bus station if they wish, either via the shopping centre, the Malls Festival Place, or Crown Heights and the bridge over Churchill Way. The coach stop at Churchill Way is currently used only by Stagecoach for Service 7. Cars are prohibited by a traffic order from stopping in the coach stop, so should not be using it for drop-off or picking up waiting. Waiting facilities for cars, 20 minutes, is provided nearby at the railway station with longer-term parking in the Miles car park. There is a taxi rank adjacent to the coach stop, but this is rarely used since the closure of the nightclub. Stagecoach, National Express or Milligan Retail have not reported any problems to the Council with arrangements thus far, and National Express has indicated that they would be happy for the new arrangement at Alençon Link to continue after rebuilding works are complete, but this is still to be discussed. Thank you.
Supplementary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to the portfolio holder who responded, and I think that's a very helpful and full answer, although I'm not sure I understand all aspects of it. It does, however, leave one question still in my mind, and that might still be Councillor Isaac, and that is, there is a massive amount of space there, I would have thought very valuable space, that is underutilised. That seems to me a property thing, and my question did suggest liaison with Festival Place about use of that space.
Shall I respond, Kat? I'll respond to this one. I'm not sure what the ownership is. I'm perfectly happy to look into it and see if there's anything that we're not doing that we should be doing.
Thank you.
I'd like to thank the portfolio holders for their combined response to that. That brings us to the end of the meeting. I was hoping to congratulate Councillor Joe Wadena. Unfortunately, he has sneaked off, as I believe he probably has got to go and change a nappy. But obviously, the birth of a daughter is a wonderful thing for anybody. However, somebody will have to break the news to him that we're not reducing the voting age to under 1 before May. Good night, everybody.